This boy was reborn 20 years in the future. In the past, he was considered a living legend, a ninth circle mage. Alone, he sacrificed himself to save everyone. But 20 years later, he awakened in the body of a bastard mage, trapped at level 1. The world was no longer the same, but his knowledge was still monstrous. When Oscar examined his body, he realized there was a good problem. He possessed an absurd amount of mana, which means that in this life, he can use that power to dominate the mages of the White Tower in a world where only the strongest rule. Several people lie dead in one place. Among them is a man with a sword pierced through his chest. He tries to communicate with anyone still alive, hoping to find a survivor. If they can't speak, he asks them to make any sound, any movement. He's practically begging for it. But after several attempts, he realizes he's the only one left. In the reflection of his eyes, he sees the head of the one who must have killed everyone. An enemy who united the demons for the first time, starting a massive war and bringing humanity to the brink of collapse. Not even the children were spared, but the mage began to chant an incantation in the leprechaun tongue, and the child who was about to be devoured was saved. She was transported to another place, delivered into the hands of a woman. This long-haired man, the same one from the beginning with the pierced chest, led the White Tower in battle. He risked everything he had to achieve victory and free humanity. If it weren't for them, that head wouldn't be lying on the ground now. To his surprise, a mysterious woman appeared to confirm the High Priest's death. Her name is Edna, the final dragon, the perpetual observer of history. Approaching the master of the White Tower, she told him she had good and bad news. The master chose to hear the bad news first. As expected from the battle, the White Tower was invaded by demons. Most of the mages were killed, and their research was completely incinerated. Quite devastated, he asked for the good news. Edna said the Imperial forces arrived early, saving some survivors and the master's disciples. Even wounded, he said that was a relief. Edna asked if he regretted his decision. The master said no. Each of those fighters was hand-picked, and he couldn't regret that choice in the face of their sacrifice. Realizing his time was short, Edna asked if he had anything else to say. The master asked her to look after his disciples, as they were still very young. Edna assured him she would check on them from time to time. The master of the White Tower found her formality amusing, and the dragon said he was deserving of such treatment. She and the continent would never forget the sacrifice of the White Tower's heroes. The master agreed, but he carried his own regrets. He hadn't been a good leader. If he had another chance, he would have lived selfishly, just for his own people. That's the kind of life he wished he could live one more time. Finally, life left his body. Edna noted the date and time of the death of the great sage Oscar. It was all documented along with the deaths of the other mages. We are taken back to the White Tower, where a boy seems to be recovering. A small leaf fell on his hand, and that was enough to wake him up. He woke up so abruptly that he ended up hitting the person who was there to care for him. Confused by the sudden reaction, the person said they were just changing the patient's towels. They remarked that his sleeping habits were very strange and that he showed no gratitude even when being cared for. The boy began to wonder if he had really been asleep, especially in such a defenseless state. Placing a hand on his heart, he realized he shouldn't be alive. He was sure the demon high priest had pierced his heart with that sword. Oscar immediately asked what was happening, just as a door in his room was destroyed. Another young man is very interested in the fact that he is woken up. The nurse tries to stop this young man, who seems ready to teach the protagonist some manners. Surprising both of them, Oscar asked how he was still alive. The blonde young man is also surprised. Analyzing his clothes, Oscar concluded he must be a mage from the White Tower. Our boy still hasn't realized what's happened. He ordered the mage to explain the current situation, which made the blonde man very angry. He's not willing to explain anything to this boy who has clearly lost his mind, since he should be reflecting and begging. Our protagonist sensed the attack and immediately thought it was a demon infiltrator. He instantly used a windshield, strong enough to break bones. That's what our boy expects to happen. But to his surprise, the shield is slowly fading away. That's when he realized the magic he now possesses is simply pathetic. However, the blonde man's demeanor changed completely. He praised the shield's structure, acknowledging that Oscar hadn't been just wasting time. The disciplinary action for what he did will be postponed. It's time to focus on his own recovery. Frank, who had a front row seat to all this, wondered if our boy was crazy. The personality of Maxim, the elder who was just in the room, is a bit explosive, but the protagonist is still trying to understand what happened to his body. He asked what day it was. Frank replied that it was September 21st. Our protagonist believes he was unconscious for 5 months, but Frank said it was only 1 day. Oscar said to contact Lloyd or Gilly, as he wants to hear from them what happened. Frank told him to forget the traitors, and not to speak the Tower Master's name so casually. Apparently, he'd forgotten what happened. Lloyd abandoned the tower to become a disciple of the Red Tower. Gilead stole high-level scrolls. This accusation angered the protagonist, But he soon noticed the air around Frank seemed completely normal. He wasn't lying. Sasha is the tower master now, but to our protagonist, he's only 5 years old. But he just found out he's over 25 years old. Frank thinks our protagonist has a very vivid imagination. Finally, our boy decided to look at his own reflection, and at first he couldn't recognize the image. He started touching his own face, completely confused. After a moment, he realized that 20 years had passed since his death. The city had developed a lot. The streets have artificial lighting, and the vehicles are very interesting. All of this is possible thanks to magical engineering. The protagonist's friends would have loved to see this. In his time, people had given up on everything, but now it's time for him to focus on the present and learn more about this new body. He came from a bankrupt, noble family, was taken in by the tower at age 10, and is a level 1 mage, but he's terrible at magic. At his age, he should be much better. That's why he must have felt pressured. He bought an illegal elixir, and after drinking it, he collapsed, which makes sense. If it had worked, his mana would have increased greatly. Analyzing the body, Oscar realized he shouldn't have survived. That's when he noticed something interesting. He has far more mana than a level 1 mage. Most of it is still in its purest, unrefined form. It could be an effect of the illegal elixir. In the middle of that bright glow, a small spot appeared. Our protagonist doesn't know what it could be. Then, something dark and viscous dripped from his fingertips. Oscar was quite frightened by it. When the viscous liquid hit the floor, he realized it might be poison, but he can't understand why it would be in his body, until he finally reached a conclusion, and now he better understands the situation he's in. The elixir was the perfect cover story. This way, no one would discover he'd been poisoned. The poison is what actually killed him. If our protagonist weren't so skilled, he never would have found traces of it in his body. Even without knowing who wants him dead, our protagonist is already determined. He has received a second chance at life, fulfilling the wish he had in his past life. It's time to live a more selfish life. And this isn't such a bad start. Oscar has decided he will avenge this body's original owner. On the outskirts of the city of Syrian, someone is bringing news to an important person. The man sitting in the armchair asked to be called Boss, and now he wants to know the news. Their shop was destroyed from the inside. Some mage is responsible, and that made the boss very angry. Witnesses say he was looking for the person who sold the elixir. The boss quickly realized it could be Oscar, who should have been on the verge of death. It wouldn't be possible for him to fight in that condition. The henchmen started to worry that the White Tower might investigate, but the boss said their client is an important person. He was wearing a White Tower ring. Just then, both thugs were startled. Someone said they were being too obvious with their conversation. It's our protagonist who has just arrived on the scene. He tracked the essence still inside the bottle, but he didn't expect so many people to be involved. Quite upset, the gang leader asked how the young man managed to destroy his shop, and our boy said he's very interested in the conversation they're having, suggesting they continue this topic. Hating this petulant behavior, the gang leader ordered his men to finish off the protagonist. His henchman charges at him, swinging his sword. If they want to settle this with violence, our boy will do the same. He moved just one hand, repelling the attack with a wind technique, which was also able to slit the man's throat. His head is now decorating the room. Oscar didn't expect just the head to be cut off. The leader of the thugs was terrified by that. Completely enraged, he decided to point a firearm at the boy, firing several bullets at him. This was completely new to Oscar, but with his windshield, the bullets weren't dangerous. Since he didn't feel any mana in them, he started to wonder how they worked. The mob boss is surprised that the bullets were stopped. Even without understanding how they worked, Oscar returned the bullets to their owner, riddling the thug with holes. Now that he's wounded and on the ground, it's time for him to tell what he knows. The entire place is isolated by a sound-blocking spell. Oscar wished the man would cooperate a little more and asked who wanted him dead. The bandit said he wouldn't talk, and for that, he got a taste of the protagonist's boot. Since his pride is worth more than his life, our boy is ready to end this, using a spell on the bandit that deeply affected his body. That poor victim of society is going into shock. The wind is inside his body, as if thousands of needles were piercing him from within. Oscar doesn't like doing that to people because it's too noisy, so he's waiting for the truth. With tears streaming down his face, the bandit promised he would tell the truth. Sitting on the sofa, Oscar told him to say everything he knows about the contractor. They received the elixir and a lot of money to sell it. That's a cheap price for our protagonist. Oscar wants to know about the man's appearance, but he had a hood covering his face so they couldn't see who he was. He was wearing the White Tower's ring. Our boy quickly realized the ring was just used to deceive the bandit. Giving more information, the bandit said the contractor had a very particular scent. It was refreshing, like mint. As for what would happen after the boy's death, the bandit knows the magic tower is very busy, since it lost its position information among the 4 towers, an investigation wouldn't happen. This last piece of information worried our boy, but the bandit knows less about it than a mage from the White Tower. Our boy said he forgot some things after consuming the elixir. The bandit said he'd give him some documents. The poor guy had to drag himself to his desk, giving the protagonist everything important about it. Oscar started to read it, even after defeating the evil high priest. The White Tower's performance last year was catastrophic. It's been in decline for the last 20 years, and the Imperial family is about to make an important announcement. Oscar found the lack of progress strange, as he had given several documents to Edna to prevent this from happening. He wants to know what the 4 main towers' businesses are now. The Yellow Tower controls lightning and has a huge advantage in the age of magical engineering, since it was responsible for street lighting. The Blue Tower contributed to the consumption of clean water, increasing agricultural and potion production. The Red Tower is extremely militarized, contributing to the subjugation of monsters. Now it remains to be seen what the White Tower does. Oscar was shocked to discover they make deliveries. That is simply absurd. Since they have mages who can fly, it's a huge advantage for making fast and secure deliveries. Oscar wasn't aware of these Wind Knights. Mages of the White Tower soar high in the sky, flying with freedom and courage compared to eagles and dragons. Our boy wants to know who had the damned idea to make deliveries. The bandit said it came from the current master. This left our protagonist embarrassed, since Sasha used to be his disciple. Potions are the biggest source of profit for a magic tower. He wants to know why the Blue Tower has such an advantage. He found out they hold a monopoly on the market. 20 years ago, that monopoly belonged to the White Tower. The bandit said they sell clean water at exorbitant prices and bring rain to dry areas. Oscar wants to know why people buy clean water, believing it must be some kind of extravagance for the rich. Since it's so easy to find clean water around, this year's White Night Festival is their last chance to prove their worth. There are only 7 months until that day. Wounded by the bullets, the bandit is in agony. He might die soon. Oscar is wondering if he should help him, since he received a lot of important information. But then he saw the notes on what the man used to do: arson, extortion, finishing people off. The man is basically a pile of trash. Oscar left through the window, leaving the bandit to his fate. Now that he's outside, he's wondering if he should be a good person in this life. Upon returning to the White Tower, our protagonist is very tired. He can't even believe he got so exhausted from using such simple spells. In his current state, he might not be able to use the magic that made him one of the greatest mages in history, the Wind Archive. Trying to perform the same technique, it barely held together in his hands. Oscar needs to perfect this body. He started with a magical analysis. He will absorb more information about this body soon. His memories are a mess, and if he wants to save this body, he needs to know its history very well. He is the heir of Count Crucian and the sole survivor of a disastrous fire. He was recognized as a genius from a very young age. Great expectations were placed on him. His grades used to be the highest, and the presentation of his thesis cemented his reputation as a genius. Oscar still doesn't understand why he would be at level 1. That's when he discovered he had mana deficiency syndrome, which left our protagonist very surprised. But if that's true, it makes sense that he's only at level 1. He understands magic very well but can't use it. The magical analysis was finally complete. Oscar is accessing the results now. That body has no deficiency at all. This isn't a disease. Someone sabotaged the boy. As the disease's name suggests, its carrier can't accumulate magic. A mage can have up to 20 mana circuits, which determines their level. Without them, it's impossible to get past level 3, but the protagonist's circumstances are very different. His circuits were tied by someone on purpose. If he was a genius, he should have known he didn't have that disease. It would be great if he had a diary. According to Frank, the previous user of that body was an alcoholic, but that could have been a persona created on purpose. Because he already knew someone was trying to end his life, so he started acting like an out-of-control playboy. If this is correct, it makes sense that he succumbed to the temptation of the elixir, even though he couldn't trust anyone. He had to take the risk of breaking those chains. But our protagonist just needs to untie this knot, something he's capable of doing. While handling some books, one of them caught Oscar's attention: the reinterpretation of basic magic. He started flipping through the book. Coming across some notes, there were several comments about wind techniques, and the concept in those words is very similar to the protagonist's technique, which isn't limited to the defensive capability of the windshield. The old Oscar also believed he should follow his own intuition. He also created several basic spells. Even though he couldn't use them, he performed all those experiments as simulations in his own head. It makes sense that he's a genius, and that's not all. He hadn't abandoned his own studies and was working harder than anyone else. The content of that book is overwhelming for a beginner. He certainly knew the danger that surrounded him, but he had to do everything completely on his own. The old Oscar had to walk his path completely alone, even while carrying the weight of his own history. Our protagonist was captivated by all of this. The time has come to untie the knot that he couldn't. And since he's very skilled, our protagonist will do even more. Those who clipped Oscar's wings will have to pay for what they've done. The next day, the wind blows through the square. Our protagonist doesn't even know why he's walking in that place. All he remembers is falling asleep after trying to undo the knot that was blocking his magical growth. Only then did he hear someone call him master. Oscar saw a version of his past self. It's the dream curse. Every time he sleeps, he's forced to remember the past. He didn't expect this curse to have followed him into another life. It seems to be tied to his very soul. But the dreams of his students weren't corrupted. Everything seemed very peaceful. He's teaching more about the categories of magic, which can be enchantment, acceleration, balance, or special types. Lloyd believes the White Tower pursues harmony, which is why wind magic is more suitable for them. Sasha asked if each magic tower has a personal preference. Her teacher said yes, as they all have different characteristics. The Golden Tower values speed and acceleration, while the Red Tower prefers enchantment and fire. The Blue and White Towers opted for balance. Gilead said he wants to learn acceleration magic, because he doesn't like anything too slow. The teacher told him he can't choose. It's something he was born with. And now he's going to show them how it works. It was Sasha's turn to cast the spell, but since it's her first time, it's going to take a while. Then, at the tip of the child's finger, something began to emerge. The energy isn't fast or dangerous. It's balanced. She's the harmonic type, just like the protagonist. The child ended up really liking this revelation. The blonde boy did the same as her, discovering he was the acceleration type. Now it was Lloyd's turn to do the same. A flower appeared on his finger, a sign that he is a special type. The boy wasn't happy about this. He asked if he could change his type, but was told it's a very rare category. He wanted to be like his teacher, who was flattered by those words. He thought about giving Lloyd more lessons and researching a way to change his type. Knowing he would get private lessons made the boy very happy. Our protagonist said that special type mages need a guide, as their path is very difficult. But receiving those lessons made the boy enthusiastic. They made a vow on it. That child's nickname is the man of his word. Even though he behaved maturely, he was still a child back in those days. A noise came from a speaker. A broadcast is being shared. Someone is calling for our protagonist, and he doesn't even know how long he's been asleep, but he must go to laboratory 4202. After waking up, he went to the laboratory and managed to unlock 12 of his circuits. He also obtained 2 mana lines, reaching level 2. Knocking on the lab door, he found the blonde professor, who wanted to know how he was doing now, since he lost part of his memory. Our boy said he's fine, which put the professor at ease. Oscar finally remembered Maxim. He was once his junior, and now he's a veteran, one of the sages of that place. He was always honest and intelligent. Our boy hoped he would have a bright future. When he was younger, he used to follow our boy around and always called him master. Happy to know he had succeeded in life, Oscar started to smile, and Maxim asked why he was doing that. He then shared that he heard about the death of some bandits. He asked if our boy had anything to say. Oscar said he didn't know anything, but acknowledged there must be a reason it happened, since they tried to end his life. He drank a poisoned elixir and presented evidence to validate his argument. Maxim now understood why our protagonist had health problems. Oscar said he tried to talk to them, but suffered another attempt on his life. Looking at the amount of money, Maxim realized that those words made sense. In that notebook were notes about the assassination contract. Maxim said he would register everything as self-defense. Oscar was grateful for this, but he took the opportunity to ask for a favor. He wanted to meet the master of the magic tower, which shouldn't be difficult since Oscar apparently talks to the master frequently. Our protagonist didn't expect that. On top of that, he can only meet her in the next 6 months. For Oscar, this is terrible, as it will be after the White Night Festival. She's on a business trip taking care of something very important. Oscar asked why she's so busy, but he soon understood that one of the high mages is absent, which is an embarrassing situation. He apologized for his rudeness, but wanted to know what level the master of this tower is. He was informed that she has reached level 7. At her age, Oscar was already at level 9. Knowing his student was talented, he thought she should be at level 8. Maxim said the cut on the body found was very clean, and asked if the boy had been practicing attack magic again. Our protagonist said he trains from time to time. After hearing this, Maxim dismissed the boy. Outside the office, someone else was already waiting. The old man is the vice master of the place, and he came to intercede for the protagonist, asking Maxim not to be so hard on him. This old man's name is Gandalf. Yes, I changed the name. Maxim said he needs to discipline the boy, but Gandalf was the one who brought this genius in, and is very worried about him. Even though it's basic magic, it's hard to perfect it at that level. Maxim realized the boy had trained a lot. He's really a box of surprises and might be studying much more than he imagined. Gandalf said they need to meet with the other elders now, who are already waiting. Oscar went to the 10th floor of the tower, the place from his dream. The floor is very empty now, and a gardener found him. He immediately recognized Oscar. This elderly man is named Wilter, responsible for managing the tower's facilities, and he realized the rumors about Oscar losing his memory are real. They used to talk a lot. Our boy didn't imagine the news had spread so quickly. He then asked why he was treated so politely. The old man said he knew the former master, the great Lord Oscar. Another revelation our protagonist didn't expect. That's why he's called Young Master. After learning this, our protagonist asked the elderly man to continue being his conversation partner, but he said he's leaving the tower soon. He's been working there for 40 years. He met 3 masters during that time and had countless colleagues. He only stayed this long because he met the great Lord Oscar. He remembers his words at a ceremony, that everyone in that tower is necessary. Our protagonist was moved by this recognition because he was the great Lord Oscar. Even so, the old man decided to leave the place. This left our protagonist surprised. The White Tower isn't doing so well, and its revenue is not what it used to be. Our protagonist asked if the old man was dissatisfied with his job because of the service bonus, something that happens after 20 and 40 years of collaboration, receiving a prize of 200,000 after 40 years. The current White Tower can't afford this prize, and to avoid this embarrassment, the elderly man is leaving before the deadline. That place is his second home, and he thinks of it with great care. Our protagonist had no idea the tower was doing so poorly. He thought the other towers were doing absurd things just for money. He definitely shouldn't look down on other people's work. In the face of need, all our boy has are titles. They don't pay the bills. Thinking about this, he got so distracted that the old man had to call his name. He was worried about how tightly he had clenched his fists. It was so intense he ended up hurting himself. Oscar asked when he plans to leave, and the elderly man said in 2 weeks. He quickly bandaged him up and recommended that the boy go to the infirmary. Oscar wants them to remain conversation friends. He told him he doesn't have to leave because there's a way to solve everything, and he will make sure it happens, as he knows a method to make a lot of money so that something like this never happens again. Now that our boy remembers what he said, he started thinking about how he could put it into practice. He can only think of lectures and research, but the payment takes a long time, and he's still a level 2 mage. What he needs is a business that makes a lot of money, and the only viable option for that is the potion market. That's when our boy came across an interesting note. What he found could change his situation. In the Vice Master's room, an argument is underway. The woman seems very agitated. She can't ignore this any longer. This is Fidelina, the one in charge of the finances. The Vice Master told her the culprit is reflecting on what he's done. Fidelina argues that a thief is capable of worse, but the Vice Master told her she doesn't need to worry about it anymore, since there's not much left to steal from this tower anyway. But she insists the boy be put in isolation as punishment. Gandalf watches this, surprised, since those two are almost 100 years old, and he agrees with Maxim. Isolation is too harsh a punishment. It wouldn't serve the purpose of the punishment. He suggested the culprit reimburse the tower for 3 times the amount of the damages. Fidelina said the budget is too tight. They need to make a decision on this as soon as possible. There are many facilities they can't even use anymore. If they sell the materials from the potion room, they could secure another 3 months of budget, but Gandalf won't allow that to happen. This is a place for research and study. These tools are necessary. They can't compromise the future just to pay present bills. But Fidelina doesn't believe there will be a future in their current situation. They've already waited 20 years, and before she could continue, Maxim intervened. Even so, she continued, saying that even if there is a genius out there, he certainly wouldn't choose the White Tower. As they discuss this delicate topic, someone knocks on the door from outside. It's our boy who went to the door, and he did so because he has a suggestion to make. He asked Gandalf if he could start a business. Fidelina was immediately outraged, as he's the one who has spent way too much on research. Ignoring her words, he presented the article he had found. A province is under quarantine due to an epidemic. Gandalf said the news is truly grim, especially if it's the dreaded Cadena flu, because there's currently no cure for it. In the past, the tower had a vaccine, but the recipe was lost 20 years ago. And knowing this, Oscar wants to start his business from this point. He wants to sell vaccines for this disease, a monopoly they once had, and it needs to be revived. Fidelina said it's not even worth listening to the boy's delusions. So far, a lot of money has been invested to recreate that vaccine, but nothing has come of it, and she highly doubts a 20-year-old Brad is capable of doing anything. Our boy agrees he's only 20, but there's something different about him compared to the others. He's simply a genius. And there it is, the protagonist's aura shining over the old guard. Obviously, She was furious. She unleashed a torrent of comments about the boy's petulance, and he had to listen to it all in silence. In the middle of her tirade, Gandalf had to intervene. That was a genuine investment suggestion, and even though you're in charge of the finances, you're being far too rude. After that reality check, Fidelina realized she had gone way too far. Now our boy understands why she hates him so much, since she's the treasurer, and for the past 2 years, he's been causing significant losses. However, Oscar asked them to consider his request. He presented the article he'd brought, asking Gandalf to look at the second page. Archbishop Baldwin has changed his plans. Oscar said this is very strange. Belonging to the Order of Eltera, there are only 7 archbishops. They are supposed to be incorruptible, but that's not what happens in practice. On pilgrimage, they stay up to a month in the cities they visit, but only when they meet nobles and merchants to get money from them. Siren used to be a large city, but that's in the past. Maxim agrees with that, but he believes the visit to the city was for religious reasons. Oscar said that if that's the case, it's even more bizarre, because the land there is cursed. The pilgrimage route has already been decided for them, and after Siren, they are going to the city of Vince. In all the other cities, they stayed for at least a month each. Siren was the only exception, and it seems this man is in a hurry to get to Vince. During their travels, if an accident happens, they believe it's a curse from the goddess herself, and that ruins their campaigns to become cardinals. If Vince has the disease, the bishop is intentionally stalling to spend as little time there as possible. That's how Oscar understood it. Fidelina praised the boy's interpretation, but said it was just a theory. Gandalf also understood these words, but they can't sponsor the boy based on this. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fund the other mages here. However, he is willing to invest his own personal money in this. Fidelina found this strategy very risky, but Gandalf is adamant, and he offered 30,000 coins to our protagonist. The problem is, that amount is far from enough. In the potion production room, our boy is facing more problems. It's time to put Plan B into action. He's going to make just 1 sample and try to get sponsorship from the Archbishop, since the pandemic puts him in a tough spot. Taking money from someone who is desperate is the best thing to do. Oscar is fully prepared to put his plans into practice. After a bit of work, the first vial was completed. For Oscar, that's not a bad result. It's an energy drink. He just made it for a little practice, confirming he still has a knack for making potions. Frank, who was carrying heavy things nearby, started complaining about back pain, but he brought all the materials Oscar had asked for and asked if there was anything to drink, as he felt like he was about to collapse from exhaustion. Oscar handed him the recovery potion. It was very good. Frank asked if it had been made recently, praising the mixture a lot. In any case, he picked the freshest herbs for the process. Oscar said he has a great eye for this and should be a merchant. Frank replied he wants to do that after the White Tower finally goes bankrupt, but he ended up getting a few smacks from our protagonist, who couldn't stand to hear that. Getting back to the main topic, he asked what they should do now. Fidelina said he should help our boy. Oscar realized that in the end, she also wants to help the tower. It's time to organize the ingredients. But he doesn't need an assistant for that. The tower has some problematic young people, and with the right guidance, they could contribute a lot to this place. And one of these troublemakers is Frank himself. Our protagonist is curious about him. It's time to get to know him better. In fact, he noticed something when buying those herbs. They are all poisonous. Black lilies, carmelias, and devil's mushrooms. Oscar said they have value as medicine and asked if Frank knows how to prepare them. The young man said he needs to boil them for 12 hours. That part is correct, however. The nutrients are lost in the process. The best way to do it would be through steaming. That way, they could minimize the loss of these nutrients to an incredible 98%, just like the White Tower used to do in the past. Frank is very interested in this whole process, and Oscar said that it's easier to work this way. Now it's time to remove the toxins. Oscar does this with wind magic, to drain everything out. A mist of poison is now in his hands, but the toxins still need to be isolated. He asked Frank to watch the process closely, which is now underway. Without the toxins, he just needs to mix each of the herbs in the proper proportions. Finally, the cure for the Cadena fever had been created. After 20 long years, the process seemed very easy. Now it was France's turn to try. Frank watched all this in surprise, as he can't even use 2 spells at the same time, and he's a bit anxious about it. Oscar observes everything. The boy's mana control isn't too bad, even if it lacks stability. However, he has reached the limit of his abilities. Oscar asked what was wrong, and Frank said he doesn't know how to use 2 spells at once. You need to be beyond level 4 for that, and he's only at level 3. But Oscar said he would teach him. Frank knows this is a secret technique, but our boy continued anyway. He said Frank should see it as a partition inside his own mind. On one side, use one technique, and on the other, use the second one. Simple as that. He has to try now, since he has nothing to lose. In the middle of the pink mist, another mist appeared. Oscar congratulated his colleague, who managed to do it on his first try. If it's so easy, he asked why this technique was kept hidden. Oscar said people are greedy. They didn't want to teach it to novices for free, and that eventually became the tradition of the place. But during the war, that justification lost its meaning. They needed battle-ready mages. What they need now is to share knowledge, because these are times of need, just like in war. Oscar said that Frank had done an excellent job, and that he is very talented. He didn't expect him to make that potion on his first try, but that only happened because he was taught very well. There's still a large quantity of ingredients, and Frank is eager to keep working. Since they have larger tools, Oscar suggested they do it all in one go. After a few hours, Frank was completely exhausted. They made 514 vials in total. Maxime interrupted their work, saying they were in trouble. The Blue Tower is in a meeting with the Archbishop right now. They might be too late. If they secure the contract first, it will be a problem. While the others worried, Oscar said it wasn't over yet. That fever is classified as a B-level disaster. Knowing this, there's still something they can try. Maxim was surprised by this revelation. Fortunately, he flies very fast. The Archbishop's guests are ready to meet with him. Baldwin allowed these people to enter. Mages from the Blue Tower are introducing themselves to him right now, and they are already taking their seats in his office. He wants to know how the research for the fever cure is going, and it seems everything is proceeding very well. The Archbishop wants to know when it will be finished, and he was informed they just need to run the final tests. With positive results, they'll get approval from the Empire's regulatory agency for commercial production. However, the test can't be completed in just a few days. They promise to finish everything within 6 months, an unacceptable deadline for the Archbishop. He needs to go to the city of Vince within the next 4 months. The Archbishop's assistant said that more mages had come to visit him. He let them in as well, but he assumed they were mages from the Blue Tower. When he confirmed they weren't with the people in his office, he grew curious about who they could be. Our protagonist is making his entrance now, introducing himself as a level 2 mage from the White Tower. Furthermore, he is there to make an irresistible offer. Baldwin was surprised by the presence of a White Tower mage in his office. Oscar got straight to the point. He said he was there to sell the vaccine for the Caldina fever. Baldwin said the timing was perfect, as the other mages were there for the same reason. Oscar asked if he was late. The Archbishop said no, because the Blue Tower hadn't finished yet, which was great news for our protagonist. The jealous blue mage called Oscar a liar, saying the White Tower has neither the money nor the technology to research a cure. But the Archbishop remained interested, asking if Oscar truly had a cure for the problem. Stating he would never lie to a man of the cloth, he presented him with a sample of what he had produced. Intrigued, the Archbishop wanted to know how many vaccines he could produce, which made the jealous blue mage furious and outraged. The Archbishop told him to stop shouting, since they were the ones who came to the meeting unprepared. Only then did the mage remember something important: bureaucracy. He asked if Oscar had the Empire's approval for it. Our boy said no. So, the jealous blue mage took the opportunity to say that the White Tower had no advantage at all, nor the infrastructure to mass-produce the vaccine. Oscar got angry because the jealous mage belittled the White Tower's history. A clash of egos is about to happen, but Oscar confirmed that the White Tower has more history than them, as it is 5 years older, and despite being small, it's a difference the Blue Tower couldn't close even in 1,000 years, which is actually true. In fact, 20 years ago, the monopoly on potions belonged to the White Tower. The Blue Mage said that was in the past, and that no one remembered it anymore. Words that deeply and genuinely angered Oscar, letting part of his dark aura leak out, frightening the Blue Tower mage. Oscar was ready to teach him a lesson, but they were interrupted. The Archbishop's secretary said there was an urgent call for him, and it was from the Lord of the city of Vince. To the Archbishop's surprise, the Lord had called to thank him for his kindness, since he had sent them the cure for that dreaded disease. The elders of the White Tower had done it, saying everything was prepared in secret and that the Lord should be thankful for what had happened. Pleased with the news, the Archbishop asked if there were any side effects to the vaccine, but he soon learned it was incredible. Now he wants to know when the second shipment of vaccines will arrive, since the White Tower's representative stated the Archbishop would be the one to decide. So he said they would do it as soon as they are ready. Ending the call, the Archbishop asked if that was Oscar's doing. The Blue Mage tried to say the boy had broken regulations, but he was brutally silenced. Oscar said he understands nothing about laws, much less about war. Only then did our boy remember they were in peaceful times. Things had changed a lot, and the weapon best used by demons was disease. They took time to produce, and even longer to be approved by the regulatory agency. This led to a new law that sped up treatment for those wounded in war, classifying them under special treatment. The Blue Mage said they weren't at war, but recalling the law, Oscar stated there are 3 cases to consider. The first is conflict between species, The second is between nations. And finally, when there is a Class B disaster or higher, and this fever falls into that category, so it doesn't need the regulatory agency's intervention. The other mage from the Blue Tower decided to speak up, saying if the useless fools from the White Tower could do it, so could they. However, the Archbishop had already made his choice. It was all over the moment he received that call from Vince. And the Lord already believes they are working together. There's no going back on what happened. The Blue Tower mage even offered to do it for cheaper, but that only made things worse. The Archbishop doesn't want to compromise his image over money. He ordered them to shut their mouths and then remove themselves from his presence. The Blue Mage stood up, very disappointed, but he said Oscar would pay for what he had done. Before they left, Oscar mentioned he had already patented the vaccine. If the Blue Tower wants to produce the cure as well, they'll have to pay royalties to them. This made the Blue Mage so angry that his hemorrhoid burst. The other mage bid farewell to the Archbishop a bit more politely, and as he passed by our protagonist, he left a trail of an essence that smelled like mint and spearmint. This left Oscar quite thoughtful and perhaps confused about his personal orientation. Now that they were alone, the Archbishop wanted to talk a bit more. It was time to talk numbers. The Blue Tower had mentioned 2 million coins. Oscar said if those guys wanted 2, he could accept 5. The Archbishop was shocked by this aggressive negotiation. A few hours later, the news reached the White Tower. A check for 10 million had arrived in Fidelina's hands, and she was practically in shock. Oscar was responsible for this, and he is being overwhelmingly praised and recognized for his actions. Even Gandalf is impressed and wants to know what happened, as the Archbishop wouldn't give away that much money. Oscar said there were some additional fees, the advertising fees. My God, this protagonist isn't messing around. An official announcement was to be made by the White Tower, stating that the Archbishop had a revelation about the epidemic, which is why they managed to make the vaccine in time. Since he wants to become the next cardinal, receiving a revelation from the goddess is very helpful for achieving that goal. That's why he paid so much. Now, the White Tower needs to send the vaccines in just 1 week. Gandalf is impressed by all this. The amount is absurd. Fidelina has already forgotten about the punishment she wanted to give the protagonist. Oscar said he needs mages for the job, those above level 4. An announcement must be made in the tower, and Fidelina asked what she should say. Gandalf told her to invite mages of level 4 or higher. They would be paid and would receive meat at every meal. Within a few hours, several candidates appeared, interested in the very tempting offer. Oscar asked his seniors to pay attention, but he was immediately ignored by everyone. Our boy used a sound magic that began to bother everyone's ears. Now that he had their attention, he said they needed to make the vaccines, and he needed everyone's help. But some of the seniors weren't so inclined to listen to the protagonist. Oscar wasn't expecting something like this. He asked Frank why they didn't like him, and the boy said the protagonist had done a lot of things in recent years. He is annoying and arrogant, on top of being an alcoholic. A girl had some questions. The vaccine's production method was lost, and she wanted to know how they were going to do it. To the surprise of the onlookers, Oscar said he recovered the method. They immediately thought he wasted money to get something untested. However, Oscar assured them he had already run tests, and the White Tower already has a contract for it. Knowing that leaking the recipe could be catastrophic, everyone became very apprehensive, so Oscar was honest. He doesn't know why those students are still in the White Tower. The girl didn't like his attitude and said she wasted her time coming here. She added that anyone with common sense wouldn't stick around to hear what he had to say. However, Oscar said he knows what each of them had to give up to remain at the White Tower. He knows that Lena, a level 5 mage, was scouted by the Red Tower and rejected several offers. Apparently, the protagonist had read the files on every single one of these background characters, even the girl with glasses who looks like she belongs in the B-list cast. He even admitted that he might not have had the willpower to refuse the offers they received. Despite that, no one left the White Tower. Lena realized the elders knew the students were being scouted, but they had no choice but to pretend nothing was happening, as they didn't want to pressure the students. And right now, this is the darkest and most hostile winter the White Tower has ever witnessed. Even so, the mages chose to stay. That's why Oscar decided to trust them and share the recipe. If he couldn't do it with people so loyal, he couldn't do it with anyone. But if they didn't want to help, that was fine. He would understand. Our boy even pretended to cry. Now it was time for the level 2 mages to get to work. Oscar put on his personal protective equipment. Lena started to approach him. She asked if she needed to put on goggles too, and the others seemed more willing to help as well. Frank never thought Oscar could be so convincing one day. He even told his colleagues the meat in their meals wasn't pork, which sparked some comments. As long as it wasn't rat, it was fine. However, everyone went wild when they found out it was beef. The vaccines were made perfectly, 140% over the required amount. A week later, Oscar walked through the tower. seeing petals on the ground. The old janitor must have done it. He must have returned to work after all the good things that had happened. Our boy was now reading the newspaper. The pandemic had come to an end, and the Archbishop's image was boosted by all of this. Everything was going according to plan. Frank approached happily, bringing news. The orders for the vaccine just kept coming in. Even the Empire was interested. Oscar said that for those who don't want to die, it's obviously necessary. But the demand would soon die down. After this pandemic, the next one would take decades to happen again. Still, Oscar assured him that money wouldn't be a problem. He already had new potions to produce. Frank thought it would be something miraculous, but Oscar assured him they would be low-level potions. The boy thought it was the Star's Tear, a very famous potion from the White Tower. They say it can even bring the dead back to life. Making it now would cause a lot of problems. They needed to increase the White Tower's power first. Since Frank was already there, Oscar asked him to bring more materials. It was time to work. He asked for some herbs that are Siren's main product. However, Oscar learned that the fields where these herbs were grown no longer existed. To France's dismay, he went to the fields in person since he didn't believe it, and they couldn't go by carriage, as the path was a bit too rough. So they needed to walk a few more kilometers to reach the place Oscar wanted to visit. Oscar was surprised by something else too. He mentioned miles, but now they were using a different unit of length, the meter. It was something he would have to get used to again. After walking for a while, they found a house. Frank knocked on the door, hoping it was inhabited. A mysterious man answered, asking who the visitors were. As they introduced themselves, a few cars approached the place. A seemingly wealthy man wanted to know if the landowner was now thinking about selling the land to him. The landowner was an elderly man who definitely looked like he used steroids recreationally, and he was not interested in selling that land at all. Almost like an emissary of Satan, the potential buyer made absurd offers, but the old man didn't want to sell. His name is Ivan, and he's an herbalist. Pressing hard, the buyer said the land would lose even more value with the arrival of factories. However, Ivan knew that as long as he was there, the factories couldn't be built. Knowing he wouldn't get anywhere, the buyer decided to leave. Before leaving, he acknowledged he had stepped on some herbs and decided to compensate for the damage. He left behind a large wad of cash. Ivan just watched as the men drove away. But the buyer noticed the visitors' clothes. They must be mages, and started wondering what they could be doing there. He soon found out that the White Tower had made a lot of money selling vaccines. This made the buyer furious with his driver for only telling him now. With the White Tower's support, it would be even harder to buy that land. Willing to play dirty, he asked if his driver still had contact with the mercenaries. Now he wanted to end the old man's life and have him listed as missing, so the land would go up for auction. It would be suspicious, but that buyer had the political backing for it. The problem was, what might happen if the White Tower decided to intervene? However, the buyer believed the White Tower was just a bankrupt institution and nothing more. Later, Frank watched the stars. Ivan had let them stay the night since it was late, and the journey back was long on foot. Oscar agreed that Ivan must be a good person. He remembered what they had discussed earlier. The man was very loyal to the White Tower because of everything that had happened. They also learned about the buyer's reputation. He was involved in shady dealings, and was also violent and criminal. For 3 years, he'd been buying up land in that region, and some herbalists had gone missing. Ivan said he couldn't be a target for that thug, and he hadn't sold his land because he was a great defender of the region's herbal culture. Because of that, he had protection from the imperial family, which is why he had resisted for so long. Oscar asked why he didn't sell the land for an absurd price, and Ivan said the answer was obvious. He loves this land. It has been his home since he was born, and it will be until his last days. That's why Oscar agreed that Ivan was a good person. This place was far from the city, and the stars seemed to shine more brightly. Frank said he was envious of that lifestyle, which must be much more peaceful and pleasant. A genius like Oscar should understand him even better. Our boy said that Frank was also promising, but Frank thought it was just empty praise. Oscar said that wasn't true, as he would never do such a thing. And having had access to the old Oscar's notes, he didn't understand why Frank was labeled as problematic. In the past, Oscar could see the stars easily, but now the city lights prevented it. Frank wanted to know if they could really revive the herb industry, and our protagonist said it wouldn't be impossible, but they needed to talk to Ivan about it the next day. That's when our boy reacted with a start. There was someone else there with them, 4 in total, and Frank started to get worried too. Oscar realized that if Frank hadn't noticed their presence, these people were not friendly. One of the bandits had already proposed to end Ivan's life, but was turned down. He realized things had changed. The old man with him didn't even care. He just wanted to get paid. The third man with them told them to stop talking nonsense. There might be a mage in this place, which is why they needed to be cautious. The youngest assassin was ready to enter the house. Using his lockpicking skills, he believed Ivan must already be asleep. He carefully entered the house and went straight to the bed, believing it would be an easy task. That's when he noticed something that terrified him. He immediately ran outside, terrified. But our protagonist had already used one of his spells, piercing the extra's skull as if it were nothing. Oscar realized the wind bullet was a really useful technique, conceived by the old Oscar in his notes, using practical concepts from firearms. Oscar went outside, knowing he had to do the same to 3 other people, but he was surprised to see only 2 men, an old man and a redhead. When asked what he did to the other bandit, Oscar replied that he put him to sleep forever. The old man expected something like this would happen to that stubborn guy. The redhead asked for the herbalist's location, saying he would ignore what happened to his companion. Oscar won't do it, so the redhead said there would be violence. He ordered the old man to attack, and he did so with the vitality of a celibate young man, but our protagonist defended himself with his windshield. After stopping the attack, it was Oscar's time to move too. The old man was impressed by all that agility, but he was already prepared to surprise our boy with another blow, revealing that his spear could actually split, becoming a very versatile weapon. This way, the old man believes he'll end it all now, but the protagonist had already cast a spell on the tip of one of his fingers. Oscar said that this fight is way too boring, throwing 2 small wind spheres towards the old man, who tries to defend himself from them. With one of his blades, he tries to parry that attack. Seeing that the metal wasn't resilient enough to absorb the impact, the blade was destroyed. Oscar said that the weapon might be versatile, but it's still useless. But just then, he felt real danger, something visceral, and our boy immediately moved away from the old man. Someone just brought a firearm to the battle. A shot was fired, and the old man's skull was pierced. Our protagonist is still on high alert. The redhead had done that to his own companion, and he said that if the protagonist hadn't moved away, he would have been pierced too. Oscar asked if they weren't allies, and the redhead explained that he was a subordinate. He can be replaced. This is why he hates criminals, as they have no scruples. Oscar wants to know what that toy is, and the redhead stated that it's too expensive to be just a toy. Our boy believes there are 3 spells on it: acceleration, strengthening, and penetration. This made the redhead much more serious, as our boy had figured it all out. Oscar said that must be it, since he wasn't able to block the attack. Despite being arrogant, the redhead acknowledged that he has talent. He even asked if he'd like to work with him, stating the pay would be very generous, but Oscar refused, since it would end with a big itch on his head, if you know what I mean. With that, there was nothing left to discuss. Oscar had to seek shelter from the shots. The former master of the White Tower is cornered. With only half his mana available and knowing that wind bullets are slower, he needs to think of something. The only window of opportunity is when the enemy reloads the weapon, which can only fire twice and takes 1.5 seconds to reload. Amidst the plantation, the redhead is looking for our boy. Finding an opportunity to act, Oscar charges forward using an acceleration spell, but the redhead found him easily and even mocked the moment. It would be impossible to dodge that, and his aim is completely clear. But to the thug's surprise, the bullet didn't pierce the wind barrier. It simply went around it. Now Oscar has an opportunity to attack. While the bandit reloads his own weapon, he's trying to understand how that had happened. Something happened to that shield. When he looked forward again, Oscar already had his finger pointed at him, at point-blank range. In his last moments, the bandit tried to understand how a low-level mage had done all that. Oscar said he would never understand, even if he were taught. After finishing off the enemy, that object captured Oscar's attention. A very problematic artifact he recognizes. On its body, Trinity is written. It must be related to acceleration, strengthening, and penetration. A truly incredible weapon. Winning against it wasn't easy. Oscar used friction reduction on the shield, making the bullet circle around it instead of piercing it. But if the theory had been wrong, his body would have been fatally pierced. Returning to the tower, he decided he needs to learn more about how to defend against things like this. But now, he needs to make sure that Frank and Ivan are safe. After all, our boy had sensed the presence of 4 people. In the middle of the forest, Frank is protecting the old man. He told Ivan to go ahead, as he would hold off the thug. He assured him that he's very strong for a novice mage, and would meet up with the old man soon. Ivan decided to take his advice, wishing Frank to be cautious. The bandit said he's too confident, and Frank asked why he didn't decide to chase after Ivan. However, the bandit is more interested in this mage, his future victim. Even though the old man is his target, he wants to know why people still respect the White Tower. That's why he decided he would end his life first, before anything else, advancing impetuously. But Frank used Wind Slash to defend himself. The bandit not only dodged, but also attacked right after, saying that it's too easy. About to pierce Frank, he asked him to do something more fun. It was then that the bandit realized something was wrong. He doesn't feel like his sword went through anything. Something is wrong, and by the time he realized it, his sword had already been grabbed by France's hands, and his neck, well, his neck wasn't so intact anymore. The poor bastard is dying, drowning in his own blood. Frank was really hit by the sword, but he revealed that he has a somewhat peculiar and unique physical constitution. After that, the thug's body fell to the ground, lifeless. Our protagonist is hidden behind a tree. He saw the whole thing. He realized that Frank isn't just a special type of mage. He also managed to turn his body into wind. To defeat this, only energy blades or powerful magic would work. Our protagonist has only seen something like this in books, and about one of the former masters of the White Tower. Upon appearing in the clearing, Oscar ended up scaring the boy. Frank asked when our boy had arrived, and Oscar said he was worried, but complimented Frank on defeating the thug. Now, they need to know where Ivan had gone. Frank started yelling for him, and our protagonist realized that the processor in France's head might be a Core Duo, which isn't very good. It might even be a Pentium. Sensing the old man's energy, Oscar pointed in the right direction. At dawn the next day, Ivan thanked them for their help. If it weren't for these young men, he wouldn't be alive. Frank said he didn't do much. However, the protagonist made a point of saying that he let one of the thugs escape, and Frank was fundamental to the old man's survival. This ended up making Frank very embarrassed. Now everything is resolved, or so they believe. That damn buyer won't give up. And Ivan said this land is the best in Siren, and its location is perfect. In the last 8 years, the land's productivity has greatly reduced, a result of magical engineering and its progress, which is polluting the waters. This could be a permanent problem for land exploration and herb cultivation. Oscar has something to ask this old man. He asked if his loyalty is related to the fourth master of the White Tower, Aius, and the old man said yes. Back then, they saw herbalists differently and were called warlocks. They avoided being seen by others and lived a nomadic life, until a savior appeared to help them, a man famous for his ideas. Reynold Aius, who invited them to live in that city so they could have some peace and rest. Not even Ivan knew so many details about the story, and our boy said he learned it from a book, but only the tower masters have access. He didn't mention that part. That's why the herbalists gathered in that city. For the first time, the nomads had land and comfort. The White Tower gave his ancestors all of this, so he wouldn't stop being grateful. Oscar thanked the man for his hard work. He affirmed that the White Tower would still be with him, but because of what happened, the imperial family wouldn't remain silent about this attack. The problem is that bureaucracy is slow. However, Oscar guaranteed that this time they will be very fast, as he is going to sign a contract with them that day about the Caldina fever vaccine. In that damn buyer's office, there's a great hurry. They need to flee. Things had escalated into a very problematic situation. But that's not going to happen, because armed men arrived to deliver justice. The superintendent of the Empire's internal affairs came personally to capture that thug. The accusations are numerous, and he's about to leave that place in handcuffs. If he resists arrest, with any luck, he won't leave there at all. The bandit tries to say he's innocent, but it will be up to the judge to decide that. Sweating bullets, the thug realized he needs to contact his superior to escape this. So he asked if he could smoke his last cigarette, but the superintendent ordered his men to cuff him right away. They were wasting time there. The bandit said this is a mistake and asked if they know who protects him, but the superintendent ignored the threat. After all, he is under the Emperor's orders to resolve this. As the bandits are being led away, one of those men asked the superintendent a question. I wonder who that guy is. They acted so fast, he must be someone important. They got an order from above. It seems the Emperor really loves the White Tower, but not even the superintendent understands it. He knows about the place's heroic past, but that was a long time ago, and the present is unfolding differently. Looking at the sky, the superintendent told his subordinate that it all happened 20 years ago. He was 12 back then, when humanity finally won its freedom from the demons. And in those days, the White Tower was a completely different institution. The older ones still remember that time, the glory of the past. But now, they have to go. There's still work to be done. They're heading east to find the factories polluting the region's water sources, something the superintendent is doing on his own initiative. And now he's thinking about Oscar and Frank, the white mages who took care of everything and dismantled a dangerous gang. The subordinate asked if they could eat first, but the superintendent said they'd do it later. Back at the White Tower, Frank is relieved, and Oscar is going to report everything to his superiors. But before they could go inside, they were found by Gandalf. Frank tried to make an excuse, saying he had something urgent to do. Gandalf found the young man's sudden departure strange, and Oscar explained that he just had something to do. Getting straight to the point, Gandalf said that Oscar had handled something big, and he would hear the report in his office, where Oscar was already heading. Once there, Oscar noticed the old man seemed a bit down, as if something had happened. Gandalf asked if he'd heard anything from Frank. Oscar said no, asking if something was wrong. It seems the Sirius family is going to take the boy away. Our protagonist wanted to know if Frank had agreed to it, but Gandalf wasn't sure. It seems the negotiations on the matter were already finalized, and he doesn't know any of the details. Frank was already packing his things in his room when he heard a knock on the door. It was our protagonist, who already knew what was happening. Frank is the youngest son of a great merchant family in the Empire. He has to return to his family's company and get married to follow their tradition. By all indications, it's an arranged marriage. Frank knows the girl is a good person. Our protagonist asked if he agreed with it. The boy said that even without knowing her, his future wife must be a good person. But Oscar wasn't talking about the marriage. He asked if abandoning magic was really the right thing to do. Frank looked saddened by this, believing he has no talent, which is why he's giving up. The boy thought he was special, so he went to the White Tower, which has fewer prodigies, hoping he might stand out. But he soon discovered the reality of his situation. As he was venting, Oscar told his friend to listen. He thought he was going to be scolded for what he said, but was surprised to hear that he is very talented. This seemed to shift his focus. Even happy with the compliment, Frank still wasn't considering staying. His older brother then arrived. He quickly assumed our protagonist was a friend, but told them they had 5 minutes to leave. Before he could leave, our protagonist asked the man how much it would cost. To be precise, he wanted to know the price of France's stay at the tower. The man demanded to know who our protagonist was to make such a proposal. Oscar confirmed he was a friend, and the one responsible for making the vaccine. Grunk then introduced himself. He is that fool's brother and the eldest son of the family. Ignoring Frank, our protagonist made his proposal. Grunk started to think he was an idiot. A child wanted to negotiate with them, but our protagonist guaranteed there would be no losses for either side. In 2 years, Frank would be one of the best mages there. In the long run, it would also be very beneficial for his family. Grants was intrigued by the proposal and asked what would happen if they failed. Oscar offered the profits from the vaccine for the next 50 years, guaranteeing that the tower's vice master would witness the contract. So Grant asked if he was going this far because his brother was worth something, or if he was doing it just for friendship. Our protagonist said the answer was obvious. The boy was truly valuable. He wants to restore the White Tower's reputation, and for that to happen, Frank is a key piece. Grant said the boy was very young, but as a merchant, he couldn't ignore the other party's naivety, and he decided to add a condition, because Oscar had forgotten something fundamental. Merchants value trust above money, and the protagonist needed to prove his worth. He has a level 5 knight as a guard. The next day, Oscar would have to prove his skills in battle. Only then would he agree. Since our protagonist is a level 2 mage, the knight wouldn't use energy in his sword. Oscar realized they didn't want to give up the marriage, a sign that the other family must also be influential. As he left, Grant said they would see each other again at noon. If our boy didn't show up, it meant he had given up. Frank was now desperate, worried about what might happen to his friend. This was happening because his older brother was furious and wanted to humiliate our protagonist. Frank suggested they try to talk it out, but the protagonist was adamant. A level 4 mage could win. Frank was completely shocked. He couldn't believe the protagonist intended to reach that level in a single day. However, someone already stable at level 3 could advance to the next level, and the condition wasn't to win, it was to prove his skills, something the protagonist could do, because his strategy was much more interesting than that. The level 4 mage who would show up for the battle was Frank himself. In the training room, Frank was uneasy. He had tried this for a long time and still hadn't succeeded. Our protagonist told him to trust him, to relax and start circulating mana through his circuits. Watching his concentration, Oscar said it was satisfactory. However, he made some key observations about areas where he was losing energy in his mana circulation. Frank asked if all geniuses could see that. Our protagonist said he was the only one. Surprised, Frank asked if fixing it would make him level up, but the protagonist said it was irrelevant, as most mages ignore things like that. However, it's something archmages don't ignore, and from now on, he would do it every morning. Our protagonist gave a long, theoretical explanation of what needed to be done. Frank had to pay attention to all those details to keep evolving. Now it was time to address something else that had happened before, the magic he had used during that battle in the herb garden. Apologizing, Frank said he couldn't do it, making it clear it wasn't due to a lack of trust in the protagonist, but he was terrified. The last time he used that technique, he almost died. He grew more anxious as he got older because his family had great expectations for him, so he decided to focus on what others couldn't do. He tried not to limit the magic to a single part of his body. If he were made of wind, he would be incredibly powerful, a thought that proved to be reckless. Initially, he thought it had worked, but then he panicked. He couldn't stop the reaction. Half of his body turned into wind, and his mana spiraled out of control. Naturally, Frank panicked and called for help. If he hadn't received aid, he certainly would have died. Back then, he couldn't do anything on his own, and he still remembers the feeling, something he never wants to experience again. However, the protagonist pointed out that he used the technique very well. Frank explained that it activates naturally in dangerous situations, which is pretty pathetic. But our protagonist didn't see it that way. Mages face problems, And the solution to this one is very simple. Frank needs to learn to control his mana even better. The problem is, that depends on talent, and he doesn't know how to get around that. Oscar confirmed there was a way to perfect this skill, drawing a summoning circle on the floor. Frank asked if he was going to make a contract with a demon. Our boy said that none would appear, even if they were called. What he was going to summon now was a spirit, a wind spirit, to place inside France's body. Determined to improve, Frank made a grand oath to the wind spirit, but so far, nothing happened, as his affinity with spirits was very low. Frank said he felt a slight breeze, but the protagonist assured him it was just his own disappointed sigh. However, he shouldn't get discouraged. Few humans have an affinity with spirits. Frank despaired once again, since this was his only way to better control his mana, but the protagonist said there was another method, a spirit summoning technique he learned in his past life, in the company of the elves. Now, it was our protagonist's turn to try. He was sure the Spirit King would remember him. In the past, he hadn't done this in a training room, but in front of the World Tree itself. With just a few words, Oscar asked the wind spirit to come to him. A strong gust of wind swept through the place. He actually succeeded on his first try, and a spirit appeared before him, asking if that human had summoned it, the first time in 27 years. Oscar said he wanted to make a contract, and asked if the spirit needed anything. The spirit assured him that no formalities were needed, but it asked if he wanted to form a friendship connection with the high spirit Celestin. Our protagonist said no. This left everyone very surprised. Only then did he remember he should have started with that part. Actually, the one who needed a spirit was a boy who was also there. The time for the duel had come. Everyone was already gathered. Gandalf was there too, acknowledging that the vaccine's inventor was indeed very stubborn. Grance's knight was introduced. He was truly at level 5. The battle would be simple. Whoever took the other's necklace would be the winner. If there was no victor in 5 minutes, Grank would accept defeat. Oscar liked those rules and was eager to start. They asked if it was okay for him to fight in those clothes, to which our protagonist said yes, since he wasn't going to be the one fighting. Frank finally presented himself to them. This left his brother completely speechless, unable to understand what was happening. Oscar remembered the terms of the bet. He needed to show his skill, and he had masterfully taught Frank the day before. Granch was furious about this, assuming that by putting his brother forward, his knight would go easy on him. But the protagonist disagreed, believing a level 4 mage had a better chance of winning. Granch was surprised, knowing his brother was level 3 just yesterday. However, for Franks to become an elite mage in 2 years, our protagonist had to prove his methods. Granch told his knight not to go easy, and our protagonist told Frank not to be scared. He just needed to do as he was taught. The boy tried to summon his courage, but he agreed. Now he was completely determined to win. The knight greeted the young master very politely. Finally, the match was declared to have begun. Frank immediately started creating distance, moving away from the knight. This was also part of the strategy. That's when the boy felt a threatening energy, and it was coming at him in the form of a dangerous sword, an absurd pressure. That enemy was truly level 5. Even without using energy, he was still intimidating. Frank was nearly paralyzed with fear, but slowly, he began to remember the previous day, the protagonist's words. Oscar was also being an excellent friend, enough to make Frank even braver. He managed to produce a blade of wind in the battle. It was time to claim victory. This was the first time in his life he'd heard someone say they needed him. As he attacked, Frank didn't want to disappoint our protagonist. The knight defended with ease, but noticed the young master had grown stronger. He could even use 2 spells at once, but perhaps it wouldn't be enough. And the knight decided he had observed enough. It was time to go on the offensive. Frank was already cornered. Blocking that attack would be impossible. Even so, he used the wind blade one more time. Grant watched the fight from the sidelines, curious how his brother had progressed so much in a single day. He asked the protagonist if he had used some forbidden technique, but our boy assured him the method was safe, that he didn't need to worry. However, France's growth was clear to everyone watching the fight, but the knight was determined to win. Since Frank was not a battle mage, a bureaucratic job would be much better for him. After being pressured, the knight was about to take the necklace from his neck. Grant thought he had won, and our protagonist said the battle was over. This left the young man very intrigued, not understanding why the protagonist had started to smile. Last night they trained hard. The mastery of wind was perfected. However, Frank was still traumatized. He wouldn't be able to easily turn his body into wind. However, it was still possible to use the spirit's power. Oscar was about to explain something very interesting about the contract, the part where he could use a great power, unity, capable of turning anything that touched his body into wind. He had to hide this until the end of the battle to surprise his opponent. The knight didn't even have time to notice, but something had happened right before his eyes. Frank was in possession of the necklace and of victory as well. Not even Frank himself could believe what had happened, but after a moment, he started celebrating like a child. Granch knew that technique was the wind god, something his brother shouldn't be able to use again. Gandalf said the match was over and asked if Grant agreed with the results, but the young man was completely surprised as our protagonist had taught his brother for only one day, enough to make him achieve a new level of power. So, he decided to acknowledge the defeat. Gandalf said it was a long journey, and a shame the young man had to leave so soon. However, Grant asked them to take care of his younger brother, acknowledging that he had grown up a little more. Since Frank didn't understand it was a compliment, he asked his brother to repeat it, but he had already lost his patience, so he decided to leave. Oscar found what his friend did very funny. Frank did it on purpose, pretending he hadn't heard the compliment, but the next day, he was confronted with a harsh reality. He would have to go through that door, except it didn't look like a training room. That dark energy seemed to come from a prison. Our boy said it had been used as one, but that was hundreds of years ago. Frank said he'd done nothing wrong and asked why he had to train in isolation, but this was an order from Gandalf himself, who already had great expectations for the boy. Frank was devastated, as he hadn't even had a chance to rest. It was up to him to use this time to perfect his techniques. Our protagonist said he could do it, but the poor guy was heartbroken. Closing the door, our protagonist mentally apologized since he was the one who had requested that training. 30 days of isolated training. Oscar said it was absolutely necessary. Knowing it would be difficult to endure, the old man acknowledged they needed to take good care of the boy when he returned. Furthermore, the young man's family company was sharing its distribution route free of charge. Oscar quickly realized that Grant was a visionary. The success of the White Tower could bring them great prosperity, which wasn't bad for anyone. That was excellent news. The old man also had something to ask the protagonist. He asked if he would like to give a lecture. Oscar was caught off guard by this, acknowledging that he was capable of doing something like that. However, he was supposed to be more focused on the potions department. Intrigued, our boy asked Gandalf if there was a specific reason for this. The old man noticed that our protagonist picked up on things easily. He asked if he had ever heard of the Night of Mages, a day when the mages from each tower gathered to show their skills and growth. It was created by the Emperor, so they could grow closer. But in practice, they fight every time it happens. It should have been canceled a long time ago. Oscar wondered why the old man was bringing it up now. The details will be announced by the Imperial family in the new year, and Gandalf's real fear was the Black Tower. Since they want to be one of the top 4, the White Tower could be attacked, so they needed to be cautious. This was more than enough to fill the protagonist with determination. Like a JoJo character, he guaranteed he would do it. Walking through the halls, Oscar was furious. The Black Tower was so arrogant to think they could do that. At least Frank was now level 4. It all happened because the spirit remembered our protagonist keeping its promise. The truth is, that spirit didn't like being summoned by one person only to make a contract with another. Oscar summoned the spirit one more time to give it a message. Tell Salafrion of the Silence that the White Mage has returned. At first, the Wind Spirit was furious because our protagonist spoke the Spirit King's name. But what surprised it most was the true identity of this human, which made the Spirit King issue a command. Oscar said he won't spoil the fun by revealing who it is. He was informed that Salafrion has already given his approval. It won't be a contract, just a transplant. That's enough for our boy. He also has a message to listen to, a reminder of an old promise he made, a promise our protagonist intends to keep. He couldn't fulfill it in his past life because he ended up dying.
His lecture was announced, a reinterpretation of the basics of magic. Before fulfilling his promise, our boy needs to take care of that family too. A red-haired boy was walking by and quickly recognized his classmates. While waiting for the lecture, he asked if it was only for level 3 students, since he hadn't seen anyone of a higher level. A girl mentioned she thinks the tower is improving, especially since Gandalf himself encouraged this.
It's in the same place where the Imperial Observation Seminar was held. The lecturer must be someone impressive. Overhearing their conversation, someone told them to stop joking around. You're making too much of a fuss over something so simple. He introduced himself as Damien, son of Count Proud. The girl, Rosa, said he was being too negative. The tower was finally investing in something, and they believed the lecturer had to be qualified. But among everyone there, only one low-level mage was absent. Their conversation was immediately interrupted. Someone had blocked all sound in the room. None of the students could speak. Our protagonist said, "It's a pleasure to meet you all. From now on, I will be the one to present to you the reinterpretation of the basics of magic." Obviously, all the mages were surprised, since our boy was only at level 2. Still, you could see the displeasure on all of their faces. Oscar announced that anyone with a complaint could leave now. They weren't students subject to a professor's control. However, there was one condition. They had to prove they were skilled enough not to need his lesson. The time limit was 10 minutes, and within that time, they had to declare that they didn't want to stay for the class. Something very simple to execute. The students were outraged. It wasn't simple at all because of the sound-blocking magic, but they soon saw it as a test. Since the lecturer was only level 2, it had to be solvable. This was his way of saying that if they couldn't do it, they had to stay and listen to his lecture. Oscar was eager to see their abilities. He had intentionally left a few openings in the spell, but that didn't mean it would be easy. Only a few minutes remained, and no one had managed to do anything, until a boy stood up cheerfully. Damien believed he had succeeded. Our protagonist knew he was a beginner. He decided to congratulate him. The boy said it was easier than he had imagined. Then everyone heard a sudden noise, signaling the end of the 10 minutes. Damien was the only one who had overcome the challenge, and as promised, it was up to him to decide whether to stay or not. The truth was, he was very curious. Leaving would be great, but the challenge had intrigued him. Guessing exactly what the boy was thinking, Oscar decided to give him a prize. He would teach him a spell as a reward. He asked which basic spell he liked the most. Damien said he liked Windblade. Oscar asked him to demonstrate it, and the boy obeyed. After finishing his demonstration, he asked if that was enough. Oscar said it was very good, but he was going to teach him Windblade. Damien asked if our protagonist couldn't see what he had just done. Oscar replied that it didn't meet his standards of quality. Grasping the blade with his bare hands, he said it had two serious problems. First, this spell isn't made of wind, and with that, he crushed the blade with his own hands. Oscar asked if the boy knew what wind was made of, explaining that wind only exists when there is air movement. Therefore, the technique he had performed was not Windblade. All students should pay attention to this. The magic of the White Tower requires a constant flow, otherwise it will be destroyed, just as he had demonstrated. Now, for the second problem. Damien, you used too much mana in that spell. You could have been far more efficient. Our boy paused for a moment before continuing. He considered the boy's background, imagining he grew up watching successful mages in his own family, trying to copy them from a young age. But executing such magic isn't easy, so he managed it by using more mana than necessary, a bad habit he still had. Damien was surprised, because that was absolutely correct. Now that you know the problems, you can make the technique even better, but it's a shame this student won't be staying for the class. Damien was convinced by that example, and decided to stay and learn, a result our protagonist had already predicted. 3 weeks later, rumors were spreading. People were saying that our protagonist was a very talented instructor. However, they believed he was only good for beginners, even though some level 4 mages were attending his classes. The mages talking about this considered going as well. A girl with long hair listened to their conversation intently. If they didn't leave now, they wouldn't be able to get in. The first guy stood up, and then everyone else did the same, having overheard the conversation. The beginner mages were surprised. There were many more students than usual. Even Maxime decided to show up. Our protagonist entered the hall, greeting everyone with a "Good morning. Today we're going to learn a very important spell." The class was filled with enthusiasm, but when our protagonist said they were going to learn more about wind, the enthusiasm vanished. That was the most basic of the basics. Maxime had only gone there to observe, but he became so curious that he had to ask. He asked our protagonist if he was really going to teach only about wind after gathering so many people. Oscar said yes, and asked the elder to give a small demonstration. Simply by opening his palm, wind filled the entire room. Our boy thanked him for his participation. Then he called on Amy, a blonde girl. He wanted her to show her wind as well. Completely embarrassed at being chosen, she did as she was asked. Her wind was very gentle and quite comforting. Oscar asked if anyone could explain the difference between the two spells. Besides the physical characteristics of the wind, the same female student from the beginning of the chapter spoke of the mana's temperament. Our protagonist said that Veronica's answer was correct. The same spell varied in the mana's temperament, and that is fascinating. Even though the formulation process was the same, one was powerful while the other was gentle. A difference so intense it's hard to believe they were the same type of wind. Oscar asked if anyone could explain what mana temperament is. A student asked if he was talking about the 4 types, which are actually the 4 systems. To learn about mana temperament, they needed to return to the roots of the White Tower, balance. He asked if anyone could say why the White and Blue Towers represent this. A student answered that it was because of the elements they command, which was correct. Red and gold are strong and fast, but not harmonious. There's no such thing as cold fire. However, wind and water can be infinitely cold or hot. That's why they represent balance. But there's a difference between them. The conditions for heating water are very simple. At atmospheric pressure, you just need to apply energy to it. However, heating the air is an even simpler task, as as it easily assimilates with its surroundings. As he explained this, some students felt a warm breeze, while others felt a cold one. Oscar said that wind is the element with the greatest freedom. It can be strong like fire, fast like lightning, or free-form like water. Depending on the mage's imagination, this element can have any temperament, harmonizing with anything. Oscar asked what kind of entity wind represented to them. In the middle of the lecture, Maxime seemed to be completely absorbed by the lesson. Our protagonist immediately realized what was happening. He worriedly told the student next to the elder not to touch him. Oscar told everyone not to disturb him. The elder was going through a process of enlightenment. What he was experiencing right now was his own awakening. After a while, Maxim opened his eyes again. Our protagonist asked how he was doing. Unfortunately, Maxim hadn't managed to reach level 8. Even so, he hugged our protagonist joyfully. But Oscar said that since Maxim was the tenured professor, our boy was the one who should be thanking him. Thanks to this, our protagonist's future classes would be much easier now that he had earned Maxim's respect in front of all the mages. And the biggest gain from all of this was getting Veronica's attention, one of the people the old Oscar had made notes about. The next day, he went to the training room, since Veronica said it was an interesting place. But our protagonist needed to find out why she had given him such a pathetic look when she learned he didn't know about that training room. Arriving at its door, Oscar started to have his own suspicions. Only 3 of the 300 training rooms were like this. Maybe it really was special. Once inside, he began to observe the place. The energy seemed very different. An artificial intelligence started a conversation with our boy, providing support for the training in that location. Realizing it was magical engineering, Oscar quickly perceived that the Golden Tower was making a lot of money. The artificial intelligence asked if he wanted to register for personalized training, but he refused. So, it asked what level he wanted to do, informing him that there were 100 training programs in total. Oscar decided to start with the first stage. 3 balls appeared before him. The boy had to destroy them using magic or physical attacks. Before hearing any further instructions, our boy popped all the balls. Getting a feel for the difficulty, he decided to raise the level. Our protagonist went to level 100, and the artificial intelligence warned that from level 80 onwards, the test was dangerous because the balls moved extremely fast. Oscar wasn't expecting the device to be so dramatic. While he was stretching, something whizzed past his head. He needed to destroy 1,000 balls without using long-range magic and couldn't be hit more than 10 times. Knowing the rules, Oscar began to attack the balls. He quickly realized that at this pace, he would run out of mana. It would be better to use as little as possible, so he began to attack with such a small gust of wind that it resembled needles. A large number of balls were destroyed. Our boy's strategy seemed to be correct, but he still needed to be careful with the attacks. If he were hit by one of those, it would certainly hurt. After some time, panting heavily, he was congratulated for completing the stage. Our boy acknowledged that it was a great warm-up. This training is done by mages of this generation from an early age, signaling that they are better prepared. Oscar got back on his feet, deciding he needed to continue training, but he ended up being surprised by a visitor. Veronica had gone there. She didn't think our protagonist would follow her advice, but he said his personal philosophy is that a healthy body comes before a healthy week. Oscar had just come to check out the facilities, and wished her a good training session, but Veronica knew that saying came from the great sage Oscar, not the Oscar she knew. The old Oscar used to look down on her a lot. Even though they were both orphans, Veronica didn't understand this change in behavior. Speaking to the AI, she set the difficulty to level 50. She also asked if there had been any change in the rankings, and the artificial intelligence said yes. To her surprise, an anonymous participant was in first place, having completed level 100 in less than 10 minutes. She asked who this person was, but for information security reasons, the machine couldn't reveal it. Veronica started to think an elder might have done it, but only level 5 mages could do ranked training. Since it was under 10 minutes, that was the first record of its kind on the entire continent. She soon realized that the protagonist might have been responsible for this record. Back in the hallways, Oscar was thinking he would be sore the next day when he ran into Maxim. The two greeted each other amicably. Maxim said he had something to ask him. Fidelina said that the merchants weren't buying potions from the White Tower. They must have heard about what happened with the Blue Tower. Our boy hated this commercial retaliation. To make matters worse, the line for breakfast was huge, which only added to his frustration. The boy overheard a conversation between other colleagues. Oscar realized those two were Wind Knights, who worked as delivery men. Our protagonist quickly understood that making deliveries wasn't very profitable. The only good part was the citizens' evaluation, and those Wind Knights were motivated because they were well rewarded when they worked hard. This caught our protagonist's attention. He decided to intervene in their conversation, wanting to know if they encountered people frequently during their deliveries. They said yes, because they needed to collect a signature from the person who ordered the item upon delivery. Oscar thanked them deeply for that piece of information and ran out of the cafeteria. He ran to speak directly with Gandalf. His idea was to use the delivery service to make door-to-door sales. Gandalf didn't think this was very practical, since the potions made by the White Tower weren't used in daily life. Our boy said he could make new ones, and that they didn't even need to innovate much. They had a very good recovery potion in that place. It could be adjusted to cater to specific groups, retargeting them as their main market. This way, it would be possible to sell more products in a single sale. And to reach more people, they shouldn't call it a potion. A few days later, an old man was sitting in the square, complaining that he wasn't as energetic as he used to be. That's when an air knight introduced himself to him. He was there to deliver a letter from a distant friend. The two chatted briefly, and the old man said he wasn't the same anymore. He didn't have as much energy. So the air knight asked if he wanted to try something. This was the newest creation from the Magic Tower, a very effective tonic. And the name of that tonic was S0, which piqued the old man's interest. It was aimed at the elderly, strengthening the immune system and increasing energy. The salesman asked if the old man knew the other elderly man from the street below, who, after taking that remedy, was preparing to go hiking on a mountain, even with his knee problems. Confidentially, the salesman said that the prodigy of the White Tower, Oscar Crucian, was responsible for making the tonic. Since our boy's fame had already spread, the old man asked about the price of the medicine. He learned it cost only 30 coins, with a recommendation to take one per week, but he found the price a bit steep, and he had been tricked by other false advertisements before. However, the salesman insisted, stating he would never deceive him like that, because the White Tower was different. In fact, I have a proposal for you, because something interesting is going to happen in this city, and upon waking up, he started to think it might be an effect of the tonic. Throughout the day, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He ended up meeting the other elderly people in town, who thought he had died since he had been missing for a few days. They were playing chess competitively. Our elderly man was doing much better, as he could focus more on the game. One of the old-timers asked if he had taken an elixir, and another was very interested in this secret. So, the old-timer had to share with them that he had taken a tonic from the White Tower, and that the promise wasn't misleading. We are now taken to our protagonist's room, where they are facing very serious problems. Someone was showing our boy what had happened in the newspaper. The Blue Tower was offering a 50% discount on all its potions. Our boy found this cute, but the girl who shared this with him was very worried. That could wipe out all of the White Tower's profits. Oscar was sure these prices wouldn't last 3 weeks. Even so, it was still dangerous. The girl believed they would be pushed out of the market. Faced with her proposals, Oscar rejected them all, as the Blue Tower just wanted to pressure them, and using a pandemic to sell medicine could be disastrous for public opinion. Given the risks, our boy asked if the potion stock was full. The girl informed him that if hundreds of vials were stolen, they wouldn't even notice. For the protagonist, this was excellent. He had a recipe from the Zero series of tonics, and they could sell the potions that way, since it was much better than keeping a stock that couldn't be used. His market strategy was a progressive discount. The more you buy, the less you pay. As for advertising, they would invest a little in the Information Guild to spread rumors about the M0 tonic. It would be interesting to say that it helps with virility. The girl wasn't sure if this strategy would work, but the protagonist told her she should just watch. 3 weeks later, something was happening inside the Blue Tower. That envious mage who appeared at the beginning of the story was looking very smug. He's sure that this way they'll be able to crush the White Tower. The department head must be very pleased. Just then, the department head approached him, asking if he had read the latest news. Full of enthusiasm, he said he hadn't yet. His smile irritated the department head, who slapped him across the face with the newspaper, telling him he should read what had happened. The results weren't good, and they had lost a lot of profit with that aggressive strategy. The White Tower's tonic industry is a massive success. They sold 10 million vials in 1 month. The jealous man definitely wasn't expecting this. The sales volume was boosted by door-to-door sales. An interview with our protagonist even acknowledged the Blue Tower's participation in it, which showed them how to make money. Now they're in a complicated situation. Looking at the sales chart doesn't give you the full picture, since public opinion is very favorable to them. Now, this jealous man is going to be very busy. Even if he worked for free for the rest of his life, he still wouldn't be able to cover the losses. On the eastern side of the continent, the news spread. A large creature is advancing, and men armed with swords are trying to contain it, but their offensive formation is being destroyed. Those samurai don't know what to do anymore, as this creature is much stronger than them. Finally, someone appeared, and this mysterious person seemed to be looking for the creature. It's time for it to return to its home territory, and if it doesn't want to, it will be turned to dust. A technique called Relentless Wind was directed at the creature, slicing it into several pieces. The mysterious woman said this type of event is happening too often. From her clothes, the samurai realized she comes from the White White Tower. The woman went to speak with Yang, who apologized for appearing this way. Finally, she removed her hood. This is Sasha, the master of the White Tower and our protagonist's disciple from his past life. She wants to know if the leader of the Nine Dragons sect brought what she asked for. Then, she was presented with news from the Empire. A lot of news about the White Tower is spreading. Sasha is scared, afraid the news isn't good, or that they've gone bankrupt in the last 2 months. But what she doesn't know yet is that all the news is very promising. After a glance at the headline, she nearly had a heart attack. It was so surreal, it seemed like it was made up just to please her. Sasha hadn't imagined the delivery service would be part of it too. She didn't even start it with that in mind. Her goal was something else. Finally, she said she was leaving, stating that the payment should be made to the Imperial account. In a few seconds, Sasha vanished into thin air. While traveling, she began to wonder what could have happened at the White Tower. She needs to check in person. Back to our protagonist. The blonde girl said he is definitely a mage. But Oscar doesn't know why she said those words. The truth is, he managed to shake the Blue Tower with a simple interview. Tonic sales had increased significantly thanks to what he did. Other cities are also interested in the product. Since the performance is satisfactory, the girl contacted the military, but they aren't sure if they'll buy it or not. As there are no more problems, she doesn't need to report anything to the protagonist. However, she was very impressed by everything that happened. What needs to be done now is a monthly report on sales performance. After handling this step, Oscar can focus on the tower's internal stability, like restoring ancient magic books. Even though the old Oscar from this life was a genius, it would be very strange to start announcing advanced magic theory. Our boy would like to use someone else's name to do this, someone respected enough. It would be great if this person just fell from the sky. Down the halls of the White Tower, the mage walks, stretching his arms. Outside, he realized he hadn't seen the sunlight in a long time. Maxim and Fidelina quickly greet this person. His name is Schwein, and he has been in seclusion for a long time, for 3 months. The poor guy did it for his own research. He's an expert in magic theory. He's overwhelmed because of the White Knight that year, and he still hasn't gotten any results. Fidelina knows it's been 7 years since this guy started his research, but he seems completely stuck, facing practical difficulties. Maxime suggested our protagonist as a research assistant, but Schwein immediately refused the proposal, saying his research is too complex for a level 1 mage. That's when they informed him that our boy is already at level 2. He was also surprised by Fidelina's attitude, as she was now defending someone she used to hate. Only then was he updated on what had changed in that place. All the mages seemed much happier, as if they had won the lottery. This was caused by our protagonist, who is now exploring his full potential. After being properly updated, Schwein was impressed with our boy's abilities, and the other 2 elders can't stop showering him with praise, stating that Oscar is truly phenomenal. Now that he's been informed, he decided he would meet with him, but he isn't getting his hopes up. The problem is that his research is complex. Observing the same thing from the roof and from the first floors is completely different. To be more specific, what he wants to find is the restoration of what the wisest among the mages once wanted, the great Oscar. Later, someone informed our protagonist about a sudden evaluation. It's Professor Schwein, an expert in magic theory and the recovery of lost magics, forgotten by time. And for his current research, he needs help. This type of person is exactly what our protagonist had been hoping for. Schwein apologized for making the boy go through the test, even though he knows he needs help. However, Oscar acknowledged that it was plausible that he was looking for a capable assistant. By ensuring he would do well on this test, our protagonist secured the perfect alibi. No one will question the contribution of a level 2 mage, since the professor is the head of the research. The test was easier than expected. A level 6 mage would have had the same opinion. This professor must be looking for someone who can help him spot basic errors. His research must be reaching its final stage. Schwein observes our protagonist with a certain interest. He didn't imagine he would answer the test so quickly, unless of course, he thinks like a high-level mage. Since he's already on the last page, maybe he really can be useful for the research. The problem is that the last questions are the most difficult. Oscar quickly realized that this is the magic he had created in his past life, and there are still materials for this same magic in this place. Finally, the protagonist finished the test. Schwein praised the boy's work but was a bit skeptical, as he answered the last question very quickly. This ended up disappointing him, but when he started reading the answer, he had to change his opinion immediately. All the answers so far are correct. Even a professor would have a hard time answering like that. Visibly intrigued, Schwein asked our protagonist if he believes the answer to the last question is really correct. Oscar said yes, but the professor is interested in the 4 mana values he had written down. Our protagonist used the value of fluid mana and asked if the professor doesn't think that way. It seems he delivered the solution the professor had been searching for all this time. He asked the boy to use these values in a practical test immediately. A short time later, Schwein was amazed at what they had achieved. He said he would make our protagonist a co-author on this thesis, instead of just a research assistant. Oscar tries to refuse, as it would draw too much attention. Schwein said the last question was something left by the previous generation, by the great Oscar. It's called Ouroboros. Our protagonist still doesn't know why this magic was recovered, much less why it took 7 years to do so. In this case, you only need to use mana once, creating an almost infinite amount of wind, an infinite source of mana, in theory. To our protagonist, this is a failure. Humanity was able to conquer all the elements. Even so, they couldn't reach the final frontier, the sky itself, and its infinity. The Blue Sky Project was intended to break this barrier. During the war against the demons, a vessel was developed to gain a military advantage. Ouroboros was supposed to be its power source, but the project was eventually scrapped since the magic didn't produce enough energy. Oscar remains very intrigued, as this is a formidable energy source for other purposes. The professor is eager to share the news with Sasha. Only then did our protagonist realize this magic would be used for a delivery service. This discovery left our protagonist devastated. He dismissed the mediocre result. But for the professor, this is the first step toward conquering the sky, the first in 7 years. Oscar asked if he wanted to overcome the same challenge from the past. He said yes, that magic would be the engine, but that isn't enough to move the vessel. The professor agrees, which is why they would use other things. These other things piqued our protagonist's curiosity. In 23 years, a lot had changed. He said that now he has this: magical engineering, something that could change the outcome from the past. During the great Oscar's research, the Golden Tower also helped and managed to produce magical engineering. Our protagonist realized he should have discovered this first, but unfortunately, he died. Using magical engineering, it might be possible to bring that vessel into existence. The professor's plan is to use a battery. It can be used to constantly increase mana, a strong heart that will pump infinite power. Our protagonist asked if the Golden Tower knows about this research, but the professor said no. Since the Golden Tower sees the airship as a great absurdity, they are investigating other things. An iron horse that runs perpetually on land. They call it a train. Knowing who the master of the Golden Tower is, our protagonist knows he wouldn't bet on something meaningless, but it definitely won't be as shocking as his airship. Now he understands the reason for that research. The delivery system is just a way to monopolize the air. The professor said he is correct. The transport of items is done by ship and carriage. The train will improve all of that, but when the airship arrives, there will be no comparison. This could give a new start to all of humanity. Their goal is to reveal this achievement during the White Night Festival, and this was only achieved because of our protagonist's contribution. Oscar is now positively impressed. That was a dream he had abandoned, but his disciple didn't forget. Given this, it's time for him to continue helping as a master. He tells the professor they should delve even deeper. They must create a prototype to be revealed during that night, a goal worthy of the White Tower. It will have a much greater impact on everyone present, instead of being just a simple, abstract concept. Agreeing with the protagonist, the professor decided to share some materials with him, saying they should be read completely. Oscar soon realized he didn't recognize those forms. The professor said it's related to the battery's production. Our boy wants to know if he can study that for a while. His professor said yes. That material is surprising. Overcoming it won't be easy, but our boy is already full of enthusiasm and wants to start researching immediately. But before they begin, the professor has something to say to him. Oscar assured him he knows how to keep secrets, but the professor doesn't want to talk about that. In fact, he'd like to apologize. This leaves our protagonist surprised, thinking he might have been found out. The professor said that this is very dangerous. When the Golden Tower finds out, they will do everything to stop them, which could put their lives at risk. This news relieved our protagonist. No one knows the truth yet. Schwein said the boy is numb to the real danger, but our protagonist is well aware of it. He just prefers to stay optimistic. If he lets fear guide his actions, he won't be able to do anything, and that's what truly scares him. The professor was impressed by this determination. When this research becomes a reality, the White Tower can return to its former glory. It's worth taking any risk. The professor found that very cool, a great optimism. Now he is also very eager to start working with our protagonist. On the first day of work, they are analyzing the practical impacts of an equation within it. Despite the force produced, they need to stabilize the vessel. 4 days have passed, and they have already made several adjustments to the theory. But they also need to worry about safety to make everything more reliable. Oscar remembered they had already skipped 2 meals. It's time to take a break and have more coffee. However, the lights went out. It seems like a blackout. They're becoming more and more frequent lately. Oscar said they should rest a bit. After 6 days, he can't stop thinking about something. The professor only managed to complete that research thanks to the boy's help, but our protagonist believes Schwein would have reached the result anyway. They've progressed too quickly in the last few days. The vessel will really become a reality. Oscar quickly changed the subject so as not to get too sentimental. A chime sounded for them. Oscar must go to the vice master's office. Schwein said he would finish the battery, telling his student not to worry about anything. Gandalf spoke about the power outages that have been happening so recently. Because of how often this has been happening, they need to clean the power plant. Our boy said he can do it. Gandalf was very grateful. They couldn't do it before because they were short-staffed. Our boy needs to get rid of the slime so this doesn't happen again. He'll be doing it with Veronica the next day. This part made our boy a little worried. Low-level mages are supposed to do this kind of thing in pairs, and she seems to be going through some difficulties. Gandalf suggested that our protagonist cheer her up, and he accepted this task with enthusiasm, understanding that the old man wants her to be mentored. The next day, Veronica complained about the protagonist being late, even though he had arrived about 5 minutes early. The carriage is now departing, heading to their destination. Veronica said they aren't going to an auditorium. Oscar already knows that part. They are going to the power plant. But what Veronica meant is that she's in charge of this mission. Since she has much more field experience than him, Oscar understood he shouldn't act like a teacher. The two are traveling in complete silence. Oscar noticed she seemed tired. He asked if she hadn't been sleeping well. She told him to shut up so she could nap a little longer. Our boy wants to know if she's worried about something, because he's thinking of ways to help her. If there's a path forward, it's best to take it. According to the notes, Veronica has an incredible talent. Now, our protagonist wants to know why that was stated so emphatically. He can't miss this great opportunity. Our guy keeps trying to win this girl over. But Veronica isn't sleeping well because of the protagonist. She wants to have strong wind just like Maxim, and because she can't, she's been training relentlessly. Accepting his interest, Veronica asked how he could help. Oscar said that if she's hit a roadblock in her personal development, it must be because of his last class on mana temperament. She said she wants wind like Maxim's, but even though she's been training a lot, she hasn't gotten any results. Oscar said the answer is obvious. That path isn't for her. Veronica assumed she was being judged. Then, he asked if she knew what kind of wind our boy has. She believes it must be boring and arrogant. Then, Oscar said he has a gentle and pleasant wind, and that he's known for it. Veronica said she'd never heard of that. At least, that's how it was in the boy's past life. However, he doesn't believe he has such a warm breeze, and Veronica wants a powerful and hot wind. Mana temperament isn't something you achieve just by wanting it. You need to find one that suits you, one that resembles you. Veronica started thinking about it. If that logic made sense, our protagonist's wind should be boring and arrogant. They finally arrived at the power station. Our protagonist immediately noticed a few things. Several slimes are scattered around the place. That's why the power outages have been so frequent. Using the wind like a press, Veronica started finishing off the creatures. Our protagonist now understands where her potential lies. Impressive acceleration and exceptional speed. Everything she does is very fast. It would be good if she knew a projectile spell, just like Majiro once did. Our boy was soon interrupted. Threateningly, Veronica asked if she was going to be the only one working there. Oscar seems to have gotten the message. The monsters are all gathered at the entrance. The information made the protagonist thoughtful, so he began to analyze the space. Veronica told him to ignore one side inside and start working on the outside, but he revealed that there's something very strange. Just observe the creature's movements. They are heading for the entrance because they are fleeing. Veronica said that slimes have no intelligence, and our boy replied that's why they obey their instincts, the strongest of which is survival. Now the girl wants to know if there are any threatening monsters inside. Oscar said they needed to check for themselves. Inside, they saw something very curious. A large cocoon was being formed. It looked like it belonged to a silk moth. Since it feeds on mana, it made its nest inside that place. And at this very moment, it's undergoing metamorphosis, which is why the energy is dropping. Oscar now had good news and bad news. During metamorphosis, the monster isn't dangerous. Maxime could handle it in 5 seconds. But when the moths hatch, they are driven by hunger and feed on everything around them. And judging by the slime's fear, this metamorphosis is almost over. They need to prepare for a fight. Oscar was already in position, but Veronica still couldn't believe it. The creature had just hatched and was ready to start feeding. Veronica is terrified of insects. They couldn't run away either, as the monster could attack the nearby town. They had to resolve this situation now. Facing the danger, Veronica swallowed her fear and told our protagonist to get back. Oscar didn't expect that, but he decided to use a communication spell. The carriage should still be nearby, and they could call for magical reinforcements. Veronica was ready to use one of her spells to completely defeat the insect. She fired a wind press towards the moth. Next, she cast another attack spell so she could get closer to the creature, but that didn't happen. Oscar stopped her from getting too close to the enemy, and he used the wind to show her something. If she touched the creature's droppings, she would melt instantly. She almost died from that reckless attack. Oscar believed the monster left an opening on purpose, as it was very intelligent. Veronica asked how he saw the dust, since it was barely visible. The boy explained he focused mana into his eyes, which allowed him to see the particles in the air. She thought it was nonsense, but looking into the protagonist's eyes, she realized he was serious. Now they had to defend themselves as the monster was enraged. As they created a wind barrier, Oscar said he would teach her that technique later. The situation was getting more and more complicated for them. Blocking one attack drained 70% of the protagonist's mana. On the bright side, that attack takes 5 minutes to charge. Oscar said they had that much time to defeat the enemy. Only then did he see that Veronica had been injured and couldn't move her legs. While blocking the attack, a fragment must have pierced the shield. Feeling useless, Veronica told our protagonist to run, otherwise they would both die there. But our protagonist can tell when people are lying, and the girl wasn't telling the truth. The air around her was trembling violently. Oscar touched her head, and the air immediately calmed, and he said she didn't need to be afraid, because he would never leave that place without her. Everything's fine now. Mages from the White Tower don't leave anyone behind. Knowing he only had 28% of his mana left, Oscar started to speed up. He needed to end this fight in one go. Watching him advance, Veronica was sure the boy was crazy. He should have taken the chance to escape. Fortunately, our protagonist had brought a very interesting artifact, the weapon he got from the mercenaries, which should be perfect for finishing off insects. The first shot was fired, and surely something had just died. But from the protagonist's expression, something had gone wrong, and he soon felt pain shoot through his body. The pressure from the impact had already dislocated one of his joints. To make matters worse, when it rains, it pours. The creature was ready to attack again, firing its attack towards the ceiling. Oscar realized the creature had been planning its escape from the beginning, but he couldn't let that happen. Unfortunately, he didn't have much mana left, and there wasn't much he could do now. With his eyes, he managed to spot a silk thread in midair. Oscar did his best to grab onto it. He managed to get his hands on the silk thread. Now, he was being dragged by the creature. Watching all this, Veronica started to wonder why our boy had such a stupid idea. Being dragged so violently, Oscar started to feel very nauseous. Eager to devour its victim, the moth's mouth was wide open, ready to start bulking up. About to be devoured, Oscar tasted victory, as his magical artifact that shoots powerful bullets was ready to fire again. But for that to happen, he had to let go of the silk thread. He was just moments from being swallowed like a pill. At the last second, Oscar managed to fire at the creature's head. This was the proof of his victory, because no living creature in this world could survive with a large hole in the middle of its forehead. The situation was finally resolved, but the protagonist had no mana left. In a complete freefall, it was time for Veronica to prove her worth by saving our boy. She managed to create an air cushion, which broke our boy's fall. As soon as they were reunited, Veronica looked very worried, wondering if he was still alive. Oscar was unconscious, and the girl began to imagine the worst had happened. But finally, the protagonist opened his eyes. Right after showing signs of life, he was brutally beaten by Veronica, who didn't appreciate being scared like that. Maxime finally arrived, looking very concerned for the young students. Our protagonist said both his arms were dislocated. This shocked Veronica, as she had been beating our boy, thinking he was fine. The next day, there was already an article about it. Veronica brought it to the protagonist. The reporters had been quite generous. They praised the protagonist's heroic deed, though he wasn't too impressed by that kind of praise. However, his friends said it could raise donations, but the protagonist did it to protect his own. Veronica said our boy wasn't very ambitious. Finally, Frank showed up at the infirmary, looking very worried. Our protagonist asked if his training isolation was over. Frank said he heard the news as soon as he got out of isolation and was very worried. Veronica told him he stank. After embarrassing his friend, Oscar noticed something interesting. France's gaze was much deeper and more resolute. He was definitely a level 4 mage now. Getting back to the main topic, Frank asked what Veronica was doing there. When asked why they were so close, Veronica said there was nothing between her and the protagonist. After a deep sigh, she realized it was pointless to worry about rumors, so she turned her attention back to the protagonist, asking if he was the anonymous participant from the training room. Oscar had no idea what she was talking about, and he really couldn't remember. Seeing this, Veronica told him to forget the question. Maxime just arrived at the infirmary and saw that everyone was gathered there. Gandalf wanted to speak with those two young people, because of France's training and Veronica's honorable actions. The boy was very excited about this, but Veronica seemed perfectly calm. As the two were leaving, Maxime asked the protagonist how he was feeling. Seeing the boy was okay, he handed him a small gift, a red box. It was the core of the creature he had defeated. Additionally, it was decided our protagonist could also take the silk that was left behind. Oscar was worried about that, knowing it was worth thousands of coins, but the vice director had already agreed to it. Even Fidelina agreed with the decision. Oscar asked if it had been offered to Veronica, but she refused the reward, saying she hadn't helped in the fight. Our protagonist realized he had to accept the gift. Maxime wanted to know if he would consume it or sell it. Oscar decided he would consume the item. The creature had just finished its metamorphosis, so it didn't have much mana, but the core helps with recovery. Our boy put the item in his mouth, and he immediately began to feel changes in his body. Now, very calmly, he began to absorb all that energy. Maxime imagined this must be the boy's first time absorbing mana from an elixir, aside from that unfortunate incident. Even so, he was very skilled. Oscar finally opened his eyes again, and he thanked Maxime for supervising. Our boy had just reached level 3. He also felt healed, and his body was much stronger. It was time for him to rest. Looking out the infirmary window, Oscar realized he didn't feel tired at all. He decided to pick up that magical artifact one more time. He thought it would be a good idea to create a spell to reduce the recoil from the shots. Meanwhile, a mysterious person appeared at the power plant. A mage from the White Tower was guarding the place. He went to identify this person, as they weren't supposed to be in that area. The man presented a special card. He was part of the Royal Investigation Team. The security mage quickly realized the man was important and asked why he had come to this place. His name is Nebula, and he was under direct orders to be there. It's not common for a moth like that to appear so close to the city. Now that he was allowed inside, Nebula would read the mana traces in the area. He immediately began his analysis. He noticed there were level 2 and level 4 mages. He asked if they were from the White Tower, and the guard confirmed they had come to deal with the slimes. The investigator was relieved to hear this. Finding the exact battle location, the guard mentioned that the moth had been incubating there. Nebula could see where the cocoon was. He also learned that a mage from the White Tower had initiated the fight. The speed of the attack was impressive. Right after that, the girl was injured, probably in the leg. Now, he's focusing on the one who must have won the battle. He became very interested in the protagonist, who was able to move without leaving many mana traces. This is one of the cleanest scenes he's ever witnessed. These mages must be very talented. Nebula found a shell casing on the ground, an unusual thing for a mage to use, and this one was even modified. The mana footsteps end in that spot. However, noticing the hole in the ceiling, he assumed the mage had followed the creature. Even for a level 4, he is exceptionally brave. Growing more interested, he asked for the level 4 mage's name. The guard said her name is Veronica. Hunting that creature alone was impressive. Then, the guard told the investigator he was mistaken. The one who defeated the moth was the level 2 mage, and his name is Oscar. This left the investigator speechless. It made no sense at all. He couldn't understand how a level 2 mage could leave so few traces. But after thinking about our protagonist's last name, he realized it sounded familiar. It didn't take long for him to remember the vaccine incident. This was confirmed by the guard. Although the protagonist has personality issues, he is very competent and skilled. Nebula also quickly identified the ammunition. It came from Trinity, that mercenary's weapon. Still, it's surprising that the level 2 mage was able to use it. The recoil is very strong. Nebula guessed the protagonist's physical abilities must be exceptional. Clearly interested, he asked if the guard could tell him more about our boy. Back to our protagonist, he's wondering why all the books are in such condition. He is in the White Tower's library, which should be in much better shape. It was once a very renowned place with rare and famous volumes, but those days are in the past. Now, it looks like an ordinary library. Oscar couldn't imagine that hundreds of years of tradition could be lost like this. Now, he feels guilty for everything that happened. He started to remember his last night alive 20 years ago. He had planned to make copies of all the books in the library, and he is certain he assigned this task to Edna, but he hasn't been able to find her yet. It's not possible that she broke her oath and disappeared for 20 years, especially since she used to be so methodical and dedicated. Oscar decided he would find her. It's time to find advanced magic to improve his progress. With the potions well underway, Oscar believes he'll have a lot of free time and asks a woman for help. She is the librarian. Oscar wants to know if she has any information about dragons from the last 20 years. The librarian said yes, and asked the boy to follow her. Oscar was relieved by this news, believing the White Tower had managed to gather this information. The woman started grabbing some books, which made our boy quite worried, because those books seemed to be just picture books, and when he was shown the copies, He realized they looked like children's books. Growing more concerned, Oscar asked if the information was limited to books like those. The librarian said that if he wanted more information, he should go to the capital's library. She mentioned there was a dragon who fought alongside humanity. Our boy asked if she was talking about Edna, and the librarian said yes. She was the great Oscar's companion. It seems she returned to her people after everything that happened. There's been no news of her since the end of the war, but our protagonist is sure something is wrong, since Edna was very disappointed with her own people. After thinking about it for a bit, our protagonist realized he would need to find another way to locate her. The next day, Fidelina announced that all external tasks were completed. Maxime is emotional, since just a few days ago, they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Everyone is very happy. Gandalf said they need to prepare well so that days like these don't happen again. He also learned that the students are as loyal as ever. Gandalf would like to repay this loyalty, but they still need to recover the advanced magic lost over time. He wished he had learned more when he was younger. Fidelina told him not to be so hard on himself. There are ways for a person to learn advanced magic. The problem is that only the Tower Master can see everything. And when Sasha took over, there were only 6 spells. 20 years ago, that number was much higher, 64 spells, each one very unique. Gandalf asked if Captain Chester plans to return soon. Maxime said he doesn't intend to return until he completes his last mission. If he were here, he could teach more advanced magic. They moved on to the next topic. Fidelina said that a mage killer has appeared in the northern region. Worried about this, she suggested a curfew starting at 10 p.m. Maxime became very concerned, as our protagonist had left, saying he was going to Baran. Very worried, Fidelina said he needs to return immediately, but the boy left at sunset and must be far away by now. Gandalf ordered them to contact the Barna branch immediately. Our boy must return as soon as he is found. Even though he's talented, he's still a level 3 mage and needs protection. While they are worried, our boy is admiring the big city. 30 years ago, this place was in ruins, but it seems it was bought by companies that run casinos. Our boy is looking for the right direction, unaware that he's being watched, until a mysterious person called out to him, saying that he had been waiting, and this man with a face tattoo knows the protagonist's name. Our boy asked if he was correct, and the tattooed man said someone was looking for him. Oscar thought it was the Blue Tower since they want revenge. Analyzing the man's mana, he realized he must be level 4. Our protagonist asked what would happen if he refused to go with him. The tattooed man said he would take him by force. That's when Oscar realized he had no other choice. The fight between them began. Our boy had to defend himself using a wind barrier, but it was destroyed by a kick. Pushed back, Oscar was left unprotected. The tattooed man was surprised he was able to block the attack. Our boy is surprised that the shield was destroyed by just a kick, without any mana. If he's careless in this fight, he'll end up defeated. Oscar kicked a can that was on the ground, towards the mysterious man's face. Unexpectedly, the object exploded. It was enough to distract him, and to make matters worse, the explosion was very intense. The mysterious man fell to the ground, giving the protagonist an opportunity to grab him by the shirt. Now our boy is ready to perform a judo throw. He slammed the man's body to the ground like a sack of feces. Right after the throw, Oscar created some distance, realizing he had gone easy on him. Getting up from the ground, the tattooed man said, "Our boy is strong. That's why he'll have to fight a bit more seriously." Our protagonist said this man is arrogant. He couldn't even finish his sentence as the enemy was already rushing towards him. It was so fast it looked like magical acceleration, and in fact, it was. But our boy didn't see him cast the spell. Oscar tried to defend himself with his hands, but the blow broke through his guard. Our boy's body was sent flying towards the nearest wall. He fell to the ground, breathless, as the enemy approached. That impact should have knocked him unconscious, but the protagonist said he wasn't even hurt. Furious, the tattooed man promised to end it with the next blow. Oscar is just waiting for it to happen. He might not be able to follow with his eyes, but he would never forget how to feel the mana. That is his supreme martial technique, the first stage, and he's about to strike the enemy. The tattooed man started to wonder why our boy struck the air. He must be crazy. But soon, he felt the pain of regret in the middle of his chest. The poor soul is spitting up blood. He's also being thrown towards the nearest wall, landing strategically inside a trash can. The assassin is coughing hard. Oscar told him not to move, or his organs might explode. The assassin wants to know what that technique is. Our boy said it uses resonance. That large wind barrier creates a frequency that resonates with the enemy's body. The vibration is amplified, directly affecting his internal organs. It's like using a firearm to kill an ant. Understanding nothing at all, the assassin asked how the boy got so strong. Oscar found the comment strange, as if they had fought before, and the assassin said it has happened several times, usually in the White Tower's gym. Our protagonist is still intrigued. Only then did he decide to ask who was looking for him, and the assassin said it was Gandalf himself. Now our protagonist started to get very worried. That man isn't an assassin. He was sent to rescue him because a real assassin is on the loose in the area. Oscar regrets what he did and said the man should have explained everything from the start, and by all indications he did try to talk. However, our boy remembers very well what he said, that he would take him by force. Only then did he realize that man is a complete idiot. Communication is not his strong suit. To make matters worse, that way of speaking is very familiar. Asking the young man's name, he learned he is Killian Rockwood, a proud warrior of the forest. Now our protagonist is very surprised. He asked if the man knew someone named Raydan, and he said yes, as that is his proud father. Besides, he was a great companion of the great Oscar. Raydan was from the Forest Tribe, a level 8 mage from the White Tower, excellent in martial arts, known as the White Lion, and a close friend of the protagonist. But when he arrived at the White Tower, he showed that his communication skills were horrendous. Now our protagonist has just beaten up the son of a great friend. After helping him with his wounds, our boy was devastated. Killian can't understand our protagonist's sadness. Oscar insists he has good reasons for it. The warrior says the pain doesn't bother him because he's a forest warrior. However, he has a mission to complete, and because of his injured body, he won't be able to do it. But he didn't say this to gain Oscar's pity. Our boy needs to help him in this situation, because canceling involves a very large fine. This made our protagonist feel very guilty, as he doesn't want to harm the young man. Killian pointed in the direction of his mission, the Voice of Paradise. His task is to protect that woman. Inside the Grand Baran Hotel, our protagonist is knocking on a room door. He introduces himself as Killian from the White Tower. Marin's manager opened the door for him. Noticing the boy is very different from the roomers, Oscar figured it must be because he's wearing a suit. Marin asked if it was room service, but was told to get ready soon. Her protection detail had just arrived. The girl went to greet our protagonist, who was instantly enchanted by her. Oscar introduced himself to her as a level 4 mage from the White Tower and asked for some water. Marin thanked him for accepting the assignment without many questions, and mentioned she heard his success rate is 80%. Our boy started to remember the information he had received from Killian. She is a very famous singer with a very rare voice. Asking a more direct question, Marin wants to know if our boy is a responsible person. He said yes, and thought that Killian must be like his father, very loyal. The girl was relieved by this information, as she likes responsible people. Our protagonist found that comment very random. It was time for him to receive more details about the assignment. Our boy needs to prevent assassination attempts. Marin has been receiving several threats lately, warning her not to perform in that city. Oscar asked if they have any idea who is doing this. It's coming from a rival singer who debuted 2 years before Marin. Oscar asked why they haven't gone to the authorities yet, but things aren't that simple. The manager asked if he knew what happened to the mayor a few months ago. Era Sweet, the competitor, is the only daughter of the city's next mayor, and the bureaucracy in this place is completely corrupt. No one wants to help them. Since city protection isn't guaranteed, they are taking matters into their own hands. Now our protagonist understands. He wants to know what Ara could gain if the show doesn't happen. Since public opinion could turn against her, Marin explained that her show will take place at the Baron Dome. Our protagonist asked what's so special about it. The girl said the venue can hold up to 100,000 people, and whoever performs there gets to perform for the Emperor during the new year. One must pass many tests to be able to perform in this venue. It's one of the best in the entire city, and it could completely change Marin's life. Our boy asked how many people she had hired besides him, as he needs to form a strategy, and he was visibly shocked to find out he was the only one, as no mercenary in that place wanted to take the job. Our boy realized the task won't be easy. He has to protect a lot of people. He asked her the value of the cancellation fee, suggesting that the contract shouldn't have been made, but the girl's mood changed immediately, calling our protagonist a jerk. She won't cancel the show, as it has been her sole objective for the past 3 years. Only then did our protagonist discover he would receive 1 million coins for the job. Angered, Marin thought she was talking to a responsible person. Removing her own wig, she said she's completely losing control. That's when our protagonist noticed something interesting. Her ears are very different. That girl is a mermaid. This species is very beautiful and possesses incredible voices. Despite having a fishtail, they can change form at will, but they can't do it for long. Marin asked if this was the boy's first time seeing a mermaid. Now he understands why there's a bathtub in the middle of the room. He thought they would die if they stayed away from the ocean for too long. The manager explained that Marin is a hybrid. Oscar was impressed by this revelation. As mermaids are very beautiful, it's common for them to have strategic marriages. The problem is, if they live far from the ocean, they end up getting sick with longing, dying early, and leaving their children abandoned, as hybrids aren't well accepted anywhere. Now our protagonist knows why the girl started singing so young, but he soon discovered her parents are still alive and have a very happy marriage. Oscar was happy about that, but he remains firm. His client could genuinely lose her life, and her audience will be in danger too. Marin said the people are safe. There's an artifact protecting the audience, and she is willing to take the risk, which only worries the manager. However, that has been the sole objective of her life for the past 3 years. Oscar asked why she is so focused on it. The girl said it all happened 4 years ago when her father was diagnosed with sorrow. The doctor said he would only live for 5 years, and now he has just 1 year of life left. There is an ancient calendar that can cure this disease. The girl needs to obtain it soon, which is why she can't abandon the performance. If she sings for the emperor, she can receive a drop of this elixir. Now, our protagonist understood everything. That's why the girl is so determined. Oscar is impressed by this girl, and by the influence parents can have on someone's life. Our boy didn't have parents, so he doesn't know how that works, since he grew up on the streets. But if a father figure is similar to that of a master, doing everything possible to save him is something he deeply identifies with. Oscar asked if he could see the stage now. It's time for them to get moving. Marin needs to practice a few things on stage, and our boy wants to check the audience's security. If everything meets his personal standards, the girl had better not regret performing, even at the risk of her own life. Oscar decided to give it a chance. Meanwhile, at the villain's house, she realized her rival hadn't canceled the show. Now there's only one option, which isn't bad for her at all. But her sycophant heard a rumor that day. Marin left the hotel with a man. Era imagines he could be a lover, but it seems he's a guard. Since all the mercenaries were blocked, she's wondering how her rival managed this. She told her minion to get information on this man. Back on stage, our boy is watching everything, analyzing the venue's security. After analyzing the audience's security, our protagonist decided to move forward with the task. Now they can formalize the contract, which makes the singer very happy. Marin wants to know if he needs to do anything else, and our boy assured her he's already seen what he needed. Feeling joyful, the girl is ready to enjoy her freedom. She's a completely different person from the furious woman she was moments before. Our boy is going to make that money worth it, and he soon noticed the presence of 2 strange individuals. Very discreetly, he used his wind bullet against both of them. Now their bodies are decorating the floor. Our boy isn't going to mention what happened so as not to make his client nervous. Ara was informed that the 2 individuals were defeated, and now they're just fertilizer. She realized her rival hired someone very competent and wants to know how her assassins were taken down. There was no sign of a struggle, but each body had a hole in its forehead. Ara was furious with this information. She told her sycophant to get the car ready immediately. She wants to meet this bodyguard. She already knows exactly what to do with him. She wants to hire him. Back at the hotel, Marin assumes our protagonist has never seen this kind of food before, and he's still surprised by her personality shift. He said they should be cautious. There was a listening device in the room, but he already took care of it. Marin is relieved, thinking no one will know what she says. Returning to her usual self, she asked if our boy was enjoying the food. He said it was very tasty and that he'd had it before, remembering he ate a lot of it during the war. Marin was impressed by this, as she imagined the White Tower was very poor. Marin thanked the waiter for the food they were served. That's when a disgusting person's voice entered the room. Ara revealed herself to her rival, saying she had paid for all the food. Marin asked the waiter if the room wasn't private. He explained the girl approached him like a friend, saying she wanted to talk to her. He told them to enjoy their time together. Our boy realized that this jerk is very influential in the city. Marin called for her companions to leave. Ara told the bodyguard to stay. Marin quickly realized her rival was going to try and convince him to quit his job, and she got straight to the point, telling him to drop his contract and work for her, promising to pay 10 times more. Marin insisted her bodyguard would never do that, but our boy replied that 10 times the amount is a very interesting offer. This made the singer very worried. He points out that since his contract is for 1 million, a 10 million fee is quite high, but the girl said it's fine. However, including the penalty fee, she would have to pay a total of 100 million. He asked if that would be possible. Ara believes he's joking, but our protagonist said this is very serious. This ended up upsetting the jealous woman. Removing her glasses, she asked for his name. Our boy said his name is Killian. Leaving the room, she said she hopes to meet him in the future, thinking he's an amateur for giving his real name. Our boy wished her the same, but when she stepped outside, she revealed an expression of deep hatred. The jealous woman's sycophant asked if everything was okay. She said no, it's time to call more assassins, but someone told her that wouldn't be necessary. This person's name is Wu Jin, and he's been following the target for a long time. Ara wants to know how he managed to infiltrate the place. He said he received a key card from his employer. He also informed her that one of his brothers is on his way. The plans have just changed. He thought he would have to take out the manager at the start of the show to destabilize Marine and stop her from singing, but he just found out he needs to eliminate someone else too, the singer's bodyguard. And the jealous rival asked for it to be done painfully. The assassin will infiltrate the next day and prepare for the mission. Ara wants to know all the details and if the assassin needs anything. She is deeply irritated, not liking being slighted in her own city. Now she will make everyone pay for her bruised ego. Our protagonist heard everything with his magic. He did it by placing a bit of mana on her while they were talking, but he's surprised the assassin didn't notice. Standing up, he said, "It's time to return to the room. They need to rest." But Marin has questions for him. She wants to know why he considered accepting that proposal. Our boy asked if she thinks he took this contract for the money, and she said yes. He reminded her that she wants to save her father, and he would like to help her achieve that dream. In his past life, our boy didn't have that opportunity. One of his biggest regrets was not being able to save his master. Seeing the girl's dedication, he doesn't want her to carry any regrets. Marin was touched by these words, and she thanked our protagonist. Finally, the day of the show arrived. The production crew is working hard. A man is hidden inside the bathroom. It's the assassin, and he's ready to act. Looking at a photo of the protagonist, the assassin waited in the bathroom for a whole day. He needs to meet his ally. If the contract wasn't for 5 million, he would never do this. He knows his ally is wearing the organization's clothes, but as he thinks about it, he sees something absurd. Our protagonist is washing his hands in that same bathroom, and he's one of his targets. He began to think he should attack him now. He knows he's a mage from the White Tower, a martial arts expert, a level 4 mage, but it will be easier to attack him with his partner and stick to the plan. Before leaving the bathroom, our protagonist pointed out that the man has calluses on his fingers but not on his palm, a sign that he uses hidden weapons. He asked if the man's job is to be an assassin. The assassin can't believe he's been discovered. He thought he should flee quickly. Since he didn't answer immediately, our protagonist was sure he was the assassin and decided to strike first. The assassin isn't sure if he'll be able to escape, so he decided to attack as well. The mana-infused blow ended up injuring the assassin. Even without being able to move one arm, he managed to corner our protagonist. He can't dodge this. Every one of those weapons is poisoned. Our protagonist fell to the floor, completely paralyzed. The assassin believes his plan has worked. He wasn't that confident, but it seems he's facing a novice. Now he just needs to finish the job, aiming a knife at our boy's throat, except he ended up paralyzed too. An invisible barrier stops the knife from hitting its mark. That's when the assassin realized there was a wind barrier around the body, so none of the needles had hit the target. Our protagonist managed to point his revolver at the jerk. The assassin is completely helpless. He can't even believe our protagonist defended himself that way. There will be no way to learn that trick either, because his brains were just splattered all over the wall. There's only 1 minute left until the show starts. Finally, the lights went out. Marin appeared before the large audience. The other assassin is worried because his partner is very late. He began to hear someone's footsteps. He assumed it was his partner, who was already quite late. He noticed he had passed the meeting spot, which is very bad. Opening the door, the assassin spoke to the person he thought was his partner, but he ended up finding our protagonist. He was already hunting this other intruder. The assassin realized his brother's footsteps had been copied, a basic trick for our protagonist. He then revealed that he'd blown up the other assassin's head. This actually left the partner relieved, because it meant there was no suffering. Our boy found the assassin's calmness strange, but that kind of thing is part of the job. This was supposed to be their last task, as they had been recruited into a much larger organization. Knowing he's from the White Tower, the assassin believes our boy is mediocre, and he's ready to show what a real assassin can do. He reveals his dark power, ready to end it all. This energy is poisoned, unlike the other one who used hidden weapons. Combining his energy with his skills, the assassin created a small black cloud. She's going for the protagonist's back. Our boy was surprised to see that. He quickly managed to dodge the first attack. If that touches him, he'll be instantly poisoned, something our protagonist had already realized. However, that doesn't matter to him. The assassin asked if the boy was immune. Our boy said he coated his body with mana, blocking the outside air. The assassin doesn't think he'll suffocate, but our boy is producing oxygen inside the barrier. This is the level of the best magic tower, and the assassin didn't realize his brother wasn't defeated for nothing. This enemy is strong. Our boy observes everything with mana in his eyes, completely dodging the approaching attack. The assassin can't even believe what just happened, and our protagonist is ready to blow his head off too. But the shadow mana began to move, completely stopping the bullet that was supposed to hit him. This left our protagonist quite surprised. That poisonous energy completely melted the bullet. Now the assassin has managed to grab our boy by his clothes, and he is prepared to avenge his brother's death. The assassin managed to land a kick on our boy, who was thrown through the window, falling to the ground like a huge sack of shit. From the height of the impact, our boy must have gotten a little hurt. He's writhing on the ground, and the assassin has already approached him safely. So far, the audience has no idea what's happening. From the fall, our protagonist broke one of his arms, and the assassin believes it's all over. But our protagonist can still use that tool, firing a few bullets at the enemy. Once again, they were stopped by the evil aura, which also melted the gun our boy was using. With the upper hand, he believes this is the protagonist's last day on Earth. That's when a loud noise distracted him. Fireworks are also part of the show. Our boy realized his client remembered what she had been taught. A wind barrier appeared around the assassin, and that turned out to be fatal. He is being severely affected by this technique. It seems his body has suffered serious internal injuries. Our protagonist acknowledges that this enemy was indeed very skilled. He needed to combine the voices of thousands of people to create that sound barrier. Even so, the enemy is still alive and tried to attack our boy, but his spatial orientation is compromised. Our protagonist seizes the opportunity to end things quickly, firing a wind bullet through the evildoer's chest, turning him into a big bag of fertilizer. Lying on the ground, our protagonist can breathe a sigh of relief. The day before, he had practiced something with his client. If she heard 2 gunshots, she was to set off the fireworks and get a scream from the crowd. That's all our protagonist would need. And thank God, everything worked out. Oscar watches the fireworks in the sky. Even as a newcomer in this line of work, he performed very well. 3 days later, Marin asked if our boy could really leave in his condition. She even called a priest to heal him, but our protagonist said he was fine. She had found him near death, however, and was worried about what might happen. Now it's time to get paid. He received an additional 100,000 out of pure gratitude. Our boy said the client's cooperation was crucial for the mission's success. She wants to know if he'll stay in the city, as the singer is leaving that same day. She said he should be very cautious, as that jealous woman is very spiteful. Now, she wants to know if our protagonist won't tell her his real name. This made Oscar a little concerned. He even tried to change the subject, but she can see his contact lenses. So, if she knew, our protagonist wants to know why she didn't back out. Marin said she liked his expression when he talked about his father. It was like seeing herself in a mirror, so she decided to take that risk, even though it was reckless. Oscar said the girl is indeed careless, but he ended up revealing his name as Oscar, and the manager realized he's the genius from the White Tower who made the vaccine. The singer immediately remembered seeing him in the newspaper too. She said he seems too normal to be a genius. Our boy replied that off stage, she doesn't look like a star either. Even so, when she's on stage, she's bigger than anyone else. Marin said our protagonist is very good with words. She thanked him for everything he had done, saying he was the best bodyguard she'd ever had. The two celebrated with a handshake. In a hotel in that city, some guy has news to deliver. One good and one bad. The person there to receive the news is a woman. It's about those 2 prodigies who were supposed to join them. Neither is in the land of the living. The less talented brother is dead. That's the good news. The bad news is that the prodigy, the younger brother, is also dead. This made the woman furious, and the person responsible was an acquaintance of hers. Killian Rockwood, that's what the rumors say. She was immediately surprised by this. Then he showed her a picture of our protagonist. But the woman didn't recognize the man, and it's impossible for his face to have changed that much, even if they haven't seen each other. Anyway, she wants to know who is impersonating her younger brother. Her name is Kaya Rockwood. Meanwhile, something is happening at the Sweet family's house, the family of that jealous woman. They learned that the Hoover family is hiring mercenaries, but the family leader doesn't care. Even though that family is the former mayor's, he only held the position for 2 years, and isn't that influential. They couldn't even protect their own leader. The man with the mustache reprimanded the butler for saying such a thing. He's after that family's classified information, and the deceased son is an easily manipulated idiot. In just 2 days, something grand will happen. Now, the man with the mustache wants to know what happened to the boy who saddened his daughter. It's about Killian, a mage from the White Tower, and Marin, the singer. But he won't mess with the girl anymore since she has caught the Emperor's attention. As for the boy, he will be watched, and soon he will be dealt with. Poor protagonist. He doesn't even know that the leader of the assassins and the man with the mustache from the corrupt family are eager to make him pay. Meanwhile, our boy is having coffee with Killian. After eating his fill, Killian thanked our protagonist for his help. He had also managed to recover from the beating he had received. As for the reward, he left it in the protagonist's hands, since he did all the work. Killian asked if our boy would return to the White Tower now. Oscar wants to know if he'll be taken by force. Killian said he wouldn't do that. He reported to Gandalf that they don't need to worry, as the boy is skilled. Oscar wants to go to the Blood Tower, as there's someone he'd like to meet. He also told Killian to keep taking care of himself, as he has become the target of a powerful person because of the last job. Killian realized he'll have to lay low for a while. His next task was for $500,000 to obtain classified information. However, that money isn't worth the risk he's facing now. Since they both need to return to the White Tower, our protagonist suggested they stick together for now. Killian found this friendly tone strange. Still, it would be good to be in the protagonist's company, as he has business to attend to in that city. He needs to capture the worst traitor in the history of the Forest Tribe. Rumor has it he's in this city, which is why Killian came here, but he can't give details to an outsider. Our boy hopes he manages to catch this traitor. He said they would see each other soon at the White Tower. Killian asked how he knew the tribe's traditional greeting method, and our boy had to make up a story, realizing his old personality was terrible. But then something surprising happened. Killian greeted our boy in the same way. Walking through the city streets that day, our protagonist acknowledged that going to the Blood Tower could be dangerous. He's thinking that Edna is hiding. With blood, the tower can find anyone. But in Edna's case, it's a dragon trying to hide. Our boy sensed the energy of someone above level 7, and he identified the source of this power, a powerful woman. She is looking directly at him, leaving our boy very confused. Her image was blocked by the cars passing on the street. When the view was clear again, she had disappeared. Oscar is now even more confused. The woman's companion said she was being too nice just because the guy is her brother's friend. Since they were seen together, they should make him pay for what he did to the new recruit, but she doesn't care about that. In fact, she'd like to congratulate our boy for getting rid of 2 useless guys, since he's a level 3 mage. There's something more important now. She asked if her subordinate could find her, even if she tried to erase her own presence. He said he wouldn't be able to do something like that, so it would be impossible for a level 3 mage to find her. Kaya is very uncomfortable, but she's sure she made eye contact with our boy, and he seemed to know what he was doing. She asked for his name one more time, this genius from the White Tower, and she found that very amusing. She's eager to see what he'll do in the future. Finally, our protagonist arrived where he wanted to be, at the city's Blood Tower. Inside the shop, the girl asked what he wanted. Oscar said he wants to find someone. The girl asked if he brought some blood. Our boy said yes, so she pointed where he should go. Finally, our boy went into the other room. Now he needs to collect some of the blood. Even though it's an artificial formula, he can replicate dragon's blood. He just needs to use a bit of his own sorcery. It should be enough to find her. It was time to put the blood in the device, but the woman asked our protagonist to wait a moment. You have to state what you want to do and pay up front. Our boy didn't know about that detail. In the past, he used to do this without paying. Now there are very specific search levels. Our boy asked for the most expensive one. He commented that the service used to be free. The girl said he was wrong. It was never free. Oscar said he found out through the White Tower from its former master. With a darker tone, the girl asked if he belonged to that place, even though she hadn't noticed his mage robes. Oscar said he didn't know who they were, clearly lying. The girl said she was relieved because they have to charge mages from the White Tower 30% more. Since their former master used the service over 100 times without paying, it caused big problems for the Blood Tower. The great Oscar was more trouble than she'd imagined. Apparently, he never knew the extent of the loss he caused that place. If the royal family hadn't covered the debt, the Blood Tower wouldn't exist today. There used to be a free service privilege for tower masters, but our protagonist abused it so much that the privilege was revoked. Oscar asked how much the service cost, and was told it's just 1.5 million coins. A completely absurd amount for him. He asked if he could pay 100,000 now, and the other 400,000 later. He could, but he wouldn't get a refund, and he'd only receive the result once he paid in full. Now he needs to sign a contract. The result could be ready in 1 to 3 days. Our boy finally signed the piece of paper, still trying to process everything he'd heard. Later, he went to find Killian, who opened his door looking quite worried, wondering what could have brought our protagonist there. Our boy wants to know about that 500,000 coin task. He's interested in it. Our protagonist is at the Hoover family's house. It seems they're very interested in that task. But since the requirements are high, it's not been easy to find capable people. Killian started explaining the details. It all had to do with the city's former mayor. He wanted to change it completely. Although it seems developed, many people suffer from gambling and addiction, and the institutions are corrupt. But this kind of circle brings money into the city, and the former mayor wanted to put an end to it. His fight against drugs was a total success. In 2 years, the business dropped by 86%. But right after reaching that mark, the mayor lost his life. Obviously, this is very suspicious. It could have been retaliation for what he had done. But so far, no one knows the truth, and a document needs to be deciphered to find it. The former mayor performed the magic himself, and it holds a lot of important information. It's possible a suspect could be found through it. Our protagonist imagines the Sweet family is involved in this, but it's the exact opposite. Mustache, the head of the Sweet family, was a close friend of the former mayor and supported the fight against drugs. That's why he's the current candidate. he gained popularity with the public. Oscar is surprised by this. That delinquent's father seems to be a good person. Some people are already approaching the room. A child asked if they were the mages from the White Tower. He's the eldest son of the family. His name is Jake. Our protagonist introduced himself, as did Killian, and the latter left the boy impressed. Since he was Marin's bodyguard, the boy is impressed with that star who had executed famous bandits, so he must be a truly incredible person. He can't hide his deep admiration, while Killian is embarrassed, taking credit that isn't his. Our protagonist got straight to the point about the information that needed to be accessed. Jake heard from his father that there was a lot of shocking information in there, but he couldn't retrieve the data. Oscar asked the boy if he thinks his own father's death is related to this. He said yes, and he became sure of it recently. This information made our protagonist a bit more interested. The boy said that after his father's death, he called many people to decipher that information. And on their way to this city, absurd things started to happen, from falling off horses to vehicles exploding. None of them managed to reach the city, and that's quite strange. Someone must be blocking them. Oscar agreed that it's very suspicious. The boy said he needs to perform a procedure on the mages, showing a scroll made by the Order of Earth. He figured the mages would know how to use it. Oscar immediately recognized it. It's a rare and brutal contract. Whoever fails to fulfill their obligation loses their life. The employee cannot compromise the information and cannot reveal it to anyone, but with Jake's permission, it's possible. This firstborn is very dedicated. Before signing, Oscar wants to confirm something. He asked if everyone else in the room went through the same procedure, and the boy said yes. He invested a lot in security, so it shouldn't be a problem. But our protagonist prefers to check personally. He asked for the others' packs to be presented to him. One of the men immediately got worked up, looking down on the level 3 mage, and automatically, their bodies were paralyzed. Our boy cunningly uses the wind, making those jerks think they're feeling the presence of someone much more powerful. The pressure vanished, and they were quite impressed. Our boy then repeated his request. Jake got the message, telling his men not to get agitated. Ringing a bell, he asked for the contracts to be brought forward. Our protagonist began a detailed analysis. He called for Tun and Coat. One of the men asked why he had been called, and he ended up being thrown back by the force of the wind. Jake is very worried, as they have no idea what just happened. Our boy asked who brought the pact. He said that person should also be confined because the contract is a fake. It's just a normal piece of paper with no divine power whatsoever. He proved it by ripping the paper, which shouldn't happen so easily. These two must have already leaked important information. After this accusation, the bald guy prepared to attack our boy. But Killian isn't there just for decoration. He completely neutralized the bald guy's attack. Then he rubbed his bald head a little. On the ground, the bald guy said he knows nothing, but Killian wants to know who he works for. Our protagonist believes he passed the information to someone and must know who that someone is. All the bald guy knows is the number of mercenaries that were hired. Our protagonist believes the culprit will soon show up to collect information and will likely attack with a large number of troops, but it's still too early to give up. Oscar accepted $500,000 to decipher the information and another $500,000 to be hired as a mercenary alongside Killian. The boy loved this proposal and is already eager to finalize the contract. The materials are properly hidden in a secret location. Our protagonist said he has one too, and the boy was interested in that, meeting people as cautious as himself. Finally, he revealed the secret passage. It's the first time he's done this for someone else, revealing the case with the secret material. Oscar began to analyze it, channeling mana into his eyes. He noticed several spells around the case, 3 in total. If it's forced open, the case will explode. Jake didn't think it would be so dangerous. He wants to know if our protagonist can do it. Oscar said it'll be easy. Compared to what he did in the war, this is almost a hobby. The suitcase was finally opened, and the boy was immediately surprised as it happened so fast. Now he could examine all this information. Holding those papers, the boy started to get emotional. He didn't find many clues, but there was proof of the politician's corruption. But in this city, that's normal. It wasn't enough to get his father killed. Oscar is impressed by the 10-year-old's maturity. He remembered that his disciple, Lloyd, had also matured very quickly. He decided to help the boy look for clues. It was time to analyze that diary more closely. Then, Oscar points to the diary on the table, asking the boy to read that specific part. The boy then asks if there's nothing written in the diary, looking a bit confused. A little nervously, he says he'll take a look and starts flipping through the pages. The entry was from June 10th, and it said almost 2 years had passed since he became mayor. In a flashback, we see he transformed the city of Baran, which was once a place of vice. But on July 2nd, he noticed that even with arrests, drugs were still circulating. He interrogated several dealers, but they were all small-time players who knew nothing. Thoughtfully, The mayor decides it would be good to talk to his partner Mark about the situation, but the conversation was strange, as it seemed Mark already knew everything he had investigated. At that point, the boy stops reading with a frightened look, and the man asks what's wrong. Seeing his reaction, the man offers to read the diary if it's too difficult for him. The next page is from September 1st. And it reveals that Mark was a cartel executive. With his hands shaking in anger, he sees the next entry was from the 18th. That day, the mayor had a plan to finally take down the entire organization. The boy then panics because September 18th was the day the mayor died. In a flashback, the boy remembers Mark comforting him at his father's grave in the rain. He's shocked to realize the person who comforted him was a cartel executive. Back in the present, the boy cries desperately, unable to believe Mark's betrayal. Oscar says he will pay, but the boy thinks it's impossible in this city. But the other man comforts him, assuring him they'll make it happen, as they're from a magic tower. Oscar says the situation is more serious than expected. The problem is that Mark could get tourists addicted and spread the drugs throughout the country. Their only weapon is the diary, and the question is when Mark will move to get it back. Oscar deduces he'll attack when the citizens are distracted by something else. The other man asks if there is such an event, and the boy confirms there is. He warns that there will be a big party in the city center that very night. With that, the man suggests they need to evacuate Jake and call for outside reinforcements. Oscar then jokes, surprised that his partner can make realistic judgments sometimes, but changing his tone, he disagrees with the idea and says they won't back down. Inspired, Jake wipes his tears and firmly declares he won't run from the fight. Jake says that if he runs now, he'll never get another chance to avenge his father. He then says that if it's too dangerous, he can cancel the contract and fight alone. But Oscar is a bit offended by this and assures him they won't abandon him. Killian reminds him that Jake trusted and hired them, leaving the boy moved by their support. He then asks him to save the thanks for later and asks if there's a communicator in the house. Jake explains that external communication was cut, as it was all part of Mark's plan. With that, Killian asks about a crystal ball, and Jake confirms he has an antique one. Needing it, Killian asks to see it, and the boy reveals it was right there. Oscar jokes about the convenience of the situation, but Killian tells him to be quiet and grabs the object. Upon touching the crystal ball, it starts to glow, showing that luckily, it still worked. Oscar is surprised and asks how he knows how to use a relic, and he says he learned out of boredom. It was a relief, as that was cutting-edge technology from decades ago that still worked. After using the ball, Oscar asks if the message was sent, and Killian confirms. He just hopes the elders aren't late, leaving Oscar completely confused. With a confident smile, Killian simply says yes, and that they should arrive in time. The scene changes to the Crystal Ball Management Department, a place full of shelves. Inside, the department head yawns and stretches, looking very bored with his job. Then a young recruit, the only other team member, calls out to him with a question. The boy asks what exactly they do there, as he hasn't been properly oriented yet. He complains that in 3 days on the job, all his superior has done is yawn. The chief asks what he knows about the department, and the rookie says it's an honor. He explains that their job is to note down and analyze the numbers that appear on the crystal ball. Long ago, before modern technology, it was this ball that connected the entire world, bringing good times. People used portable versions to send a unique number, and thus find one another. The version they use is high class and has no limit on the number sent. The chief then asks if the rookie, born in times of peace, has ever heard of codes. He reveals that the numbers could be combined to form sentences, a method used in wars. The place is a state secret, connected to the imperial family, and only the elite know the code. But suddenly, the rookie panics and shouts desperately for the department head. The chief thinks he's joking, but the boy warns that the crystal ball behind him is glowing. The crystal ball starts to glow brightly, and the chief panics. Rushing to the desk, he starts deciphering the code, which mentions Baran and the happy ending cartel. He then orders the rookie to write down the numbers, as he will do the analysis himself. Together, they uncover the cartel's plan to spread drugs and take over the city that night. The boy is frightened by the gravity of the situation, and the chief yells to call national security now. The scene shifts to a forest, where we find out the security cameras have been turned off. The mercenary leader, Omar, announces they have 5 hours to retrieve some encrypted data, but another leader gets annoyed with the wait and decides his group will act on its own. At that, the mercenary Jackson also informs them that his men will move independently. Frustrated, the leader kicks the ground, questioning the point of gathering so many different mercenaries. The thing is, with 10 groups that have never worked together, the problem is the leader's egos. Seeing the others take action, a subordinate gets angry, but the chief says he expected this. He explains that the contractor's daughter offered an extra reward, which is why they're in a hurry. So, Not to be left behind, the leader finally orders his own squad to advance. With a firm step on the ground, the invasion of the property finally begins. Suddenly, a desperate scream cuts through the silence of the night, leaving the mercenary leader confused. On the ground, one of his red-haired men screams in pain, his ankle completely shattered. At that moment, the leader realizes it's a trap and yells for everyone to watch the ground. But another mercenary interrupts him, pointing terrified in another direction, stuttering in fear. He warns that Jackson, the group's leader, was caught by surprise and was already lying lifeless on the ground. Another scream echoes through the forest, and the leader turns, startled, toward the sound. He sees his man with his leg blown off and realizes the mines don't explode when stepped on. Several magic circles appear on the ground, showing that the mines are activating on their own. In desperation, the leader orders everyone to run towards the mansion to get out of the forest. The mercenaries flee in terror, screaming for help as chaos erupts. From atop a tree, a mysterious figure watched the group's every move. With eyes glowing red, Oscar leaps toward them, asking if they have a death wish. In the blink of an eye, he lunges forward and cuts down several enemies at once with his blade. One of the survivors hides behind a tree, shocked to see his companions fall. Trembling with fear, he silently begs for the monster to just leave. Suddenly, the sound of the massacre stops, and only the wind whispers through the trees. Relieved, the mercenary spits on the ground, believing the danger has finally passed. He peeks out carefully, determined not to end up like his dead teammates. But out of nowhere, a drop of liquid lands right on his nose, confusing him. When he looks up, he sees Oscar staring down at him coldly, ready for the final blow. In complete desperation, the mercenary screams in terror at the sight of the figure standing before him. Without a second thought, he raises his weapon and aims directly at the enemy's face. He then unloads the entire clip, screaming for the bastard to just die already. But the bullets ricochet off a magical barrier, and Oscar says there's something he hates. The man is shocked that he didn't die, and Oscar explains it's the smell of gunpowder. He hates that smell in a sacred forest, and the scene just cuts to black. The image changes to Killian, who is on the mansion's roof looking exhausted from the fight. It's explained that he used thermal vision magic along with wind bullets to shoot. He rubs his eyes, saying that although the technique is efficient, it consumes a lot of mana. Still, he neutralized 67 enemies and uses a scanning spell on the entire area. With a bird's eye view, he locates himself and the two allied mercenaries in the forest. The radar shows that the remaining 50 enemies were retreating and fleeing. At this, Killian wonders if the battle is finally over, but something strange happens. Suddenly, the two allied dots on the radar start moving at high speed. He doesn't understand why the enemies would be running back to the mansion after everything. Killian finds their speed odd, since they should be exhausted, and feels that something is wrong. In the forest, Oscar notices the smell of gunpowder is gone, indicating the fight had ended. Just then, the two mercenaries come running and call out to him, looking relieved to find him there. They celebrate their victory, saying the four of them drove off 150 enemies on their own. But Oscar cuts their celebration short, and with a serious look, he tells everyone to wait. He warns them to prepare for a fight. As the enemies were approaching again, the mercenaries charge forward, screaming bizarrely, and Oscar thinks that no one in their right mind would come back. He strikes one of them, wondering if they were on drugs. But to his surprise, the enemy bites his arm with completely unnatural strength. Without hesitation, he retaliates with a powerful blow, shattering the mercenary's head in the process. Seeing the others on the ground, he begins to analyze the situation and the way they fought. One of his allies realizes this technique is similar to the one used on the tribe's chief. In a panic, the other mercenary screams for help, warning that something's wrong with them. Upon hearing this, Oscar's expression changes completely, shocked by the revelation. In the darkness, red eyes glow, and a familiar voice says, "It's been a long time." From the shadows, a woman emerges, and Oscar recognizes her as Kaya Rockwood, the traitor of the tribe. He confronts her, asking if what they say about her betrayal is true. With a mocking smile, she listens to the accusation that she stole the king's tattoo. At this, he clenches his fist tightly, saying he needs to hear the truth from her own mouth. The scene shifts to a flashback, showing Kaya was the strongest and most respected warrior. It's explained that she was an idol to him, but her image is now distorted. He doesn't understand why she did it, or what she gained from betraying them all. It was because of her that the chief went mad and ended up being killed by his own warriors. Worst of all, he was betrayed by the very ones he loved most in his life. Back in the present, Oscar asks her to deny everything and say it was a misunderstanding, but she simply confirms it all without remorse, and even asks what the big deal is. Shocked by her coldness, he is left speechless and asks if she has any excuse. With a smile on her face, she says she has no reason to apologize for anything. Enraged, Oscar screams that the chief she drove mad suffered a completely dishonorable death. With hatred boiling up, his eyes glow red, ready for revenge. Oscar gets into a fighting stance and asks Kaya if she really wants to fight him. She scoffs at him, but he says that a warrior of the forest never retreats. With a firm gaze, he states that he was taught to live as a warrior, not as a sage. Kaya provokes him, asking if he'll be alright if he doesn't go help his friend. But he charges at her, confident that Killian wouldn't lose to mere puppets. Far away, one of the allied mercenaries was gasping in fear, with his partner already on the ground. He looks back, completely terrified by the situation, and starts screaming for help. His other companion was on the ground, surrounded and begging for his life. In a moment of desperation, he thinks about using his friend as bait to escape. But he remembers his partner showing him a picture of his son, promising a family trip. Pressured, he makes the wrong decision and starts running to save his own skin. He flees, screaming with guilt, abandoning his friend who was about to be caught. But then someone grabs him, and he regrets not acting like a true warrior. In the blink of an eye, a white light explodes, throwing all the enemies away at once. The two mercenaries hide behind a tree, unsure how they survived the attack. Just then, Killian appears before them and calmly asks if they're safe now. They complain about him being late, and Killian asks what kind of bizarre creatures those were. One of them explains that the enemies felt no pain and kept moving like monsters. The other says all he knows is that Oscar called their leader Kaya Rockwood. Killian is surprised by the name, as he's heard of this person before. We learn that Kaya Rockwood is actually the daughter of the famous and powerful Radan. Seeing the enemies approaching again, a mercenary asks if Killian has a plan. He then deduces that the control ability is the effect of the legendary king's tattoo. This special tattoo is only given to the strongest warrior, who becomes the future chief. The artifact is so rare that it always returns to the forest temple when its user dies. The technique that drives men mad is a skill called morale boost, but originally, this skill from the king's tattoo didn't work in such a terrifying way. The theory was that at most, it could turn allies into fighting puppets. He's disgusted to see a sacred technique, meant for the most righteous, being used for evil. This raises a question in his mind. Why would Radan's daughter do this? One of the mercenaries shouts for Oscar, saying the enemies just keep coming. But Killian tells them no, because he has a way to finish them all at once. He then starts gathering his mana, saying he'll need 30 seconds. With a blue aura around him, Killian asks them to buy him that time to prepare. The mercenaries panic, thinking they can't fight so many enemies alone. With little choice, they start fighting with everything they've got, screaming in desperation. One of them yells for Oscar, while Killian remains with his eyes closed, completely focused. The other one screams for him to hurry up, and at that moment, his blue eyes open. With his hands together, he finally finishes preparing his most powerful technique. The name of the spell is Solitary Garden, and it's designed to cover the entire area. At that, a giant dome of light forms, and he announces that the spell is ready. The mercenaries are shocked, as all the enemies around them have simply stopped. With the spell complete, Killian separates his hands, successfully finishing the technique. Killian explains that he created a mana void space, cutting the enemy's connection to their caster. The mercenaries are lost, not understanding what that actually meant in practice. He then tells them to go back to the mansion, but one of them asks if he isn't coming with them. He confirms he's not going now, as he still needs to bring a certain person back with him. Meanwhile, the fight between Oscar and Kaya raged on, with explosions everywhere. She notices his mobility has greatly improved, and that he has corrected several of his fighting habits. Just then, Oscar prepares an attack with a red aura, concentrating all the energy in his hand. This energy transforms into sharp claws, ready to tear through anything in its path. With a swift move, he unleashes the wolf song technique on his enemy. The blow throws her to the ground, and Oscar moves in to end the fight once and for all. But to his surprise, she manages to catch the attack with her hand and praises his improvement. She criticizes him for being too honest, saying he needs to learn how to deceive the enemy. Suddenly, she realizes her control ability has been severed, and doesn't understand why. Oscar says he didn't turn anything off, and yells for her to get down because of Killian. Just then, a gigantic beam of light descends from the sky, hitting Kaya head-on with full force. Kaya is surprised by the attack, and wonders if that wind bullet is from the White Tower. She deduces it was the same one who cut off her skill, but reinforcements couldn't have arrived so quickly. Besides her brother, she knew the only other tower mage in Baran was level 3. At that moment, Oscar takes advantage of her distraction and attacks, telling her not to lose focus on the fight, but she manages to block the blow with her arm, which cracks from the force of his impact. Mockingly, she says he dreams too big and wonders where the sniper is. With a wicked smile, she says that since he's asking for it, she'll find the sniper. She then uses a magical scan on the entire forest, searching for any sign of life. But to her surprise, the search turns up absolutely nothing, leaving her quite irritated. While she's confused, Oscar charges again, and she doesn't understand how he vanished from her radar. She can't believe a rookie could hide or shoot from so far away. He lands another direct hit, and she thinks that a low-level mage has barely learned the basics. You have to be at least a mid-level to begin understanding the true essence of mana, and a level 7 mage, like her, is basically a world creator, a true god. This makes her furious that a weak mage is deceiving her, a level 7. Even though he's all beaten up, Oscar tells the traitor to focus because her opponent was him. Kaya is surprised he hasn't passed out yet after taking that hit. Then, she gathers energy in her hand and tells Killian to follow her path carefully. Or maybe he shouldn't follow at all, and she attacks Oscar with a devastating blow. The impact is so strong he spits blood, feeling the enemy's overwhelming power. With Oscar on the ground, she turns and confirms the direction the shot came from. She calls the sniper a level 3 boy and starts running in his direction. From a distance, another shot is fired, and she says his only mistake was not running away. The scene shifts to Killian, who's hoping they'll wake up and act, but he knows it'll take her a while to get here. He's annoyed by the royal family's sluggishness, as they don't act with the necessary urgency. But at least this way, Kaya and Oscar were separated, giving him an opening to act. Suddenly, a flash of light catches his attention, and he turns, surprised by the bright light. Out of nowhere, Kaya appears in front of him, saying her estimate was right after all. He's shocked she arrived in a single leap, and she explains the scan. Kaya reveals that he was perfectly mimicking the mana code of the surrounding trees. With a mocking smile on her face, she greets the level 3 mage who deceived her. Then she floats in front of him and asks if they haven't met before. He says they saw each other from across the street, and she confirms they made eye contact. Then he asks what she's doing there, but she says he already knows why. With a smile, she warns him that she won't back down, as she has her own reasons for getting involved in the election. Confused, Killian asks why she became Mark Sweet's subordinate, which surprises her. But she laughs in his face and says she's a tattooer, and not on his level. At this, he's completely lost and asks what the hell these tattooers are. She's shocked that he knows about the Purple Brigade but not about the tattooers. Killian remembers Oscar mentioning the brigade, and that they were hired by someone powerful. Suddenly, Oscar arrives and asks if he's okay, and Kaya is surprised by his speed. He warns that she's a monster, but they have no choice but to fight. Killian agrees because of their promise and asks him to buy about 10 seconds. But Kaya interrupts their conversation, asking how long they're going to keep whispering secrets. Oscar says 10 seconds won't be easy, but he'll do his best to get it. With that, he gets into a combat stance, preparing to face the enemy head-on. She thanks him for waiting, but Killian says it's just basic etiquette when dealing with children. Kaya smirks, saying she's curious to see what else he can do. Killian then focuses, knowing that just 10 seconds isn't enough time. But since the opponent is a forest warrior, he hears Oscar shout his name. At that moment, Oscar unleashes a powerful red aura, preparing to fight seriously. Kaya is surprised and asks if he's going so far as to activate his tattoo. He feels a great power pulsing through his body, releasing a gigantic energy. With his tattoo glowing, he declares this is all the power he can show for now. Fearlessly, Kaya calls him out, ready to fight the forest warrior. She also prepares to fight, unleashing a red aura and getting into her stance. Their two powers clash, creating a tornado of energy that destroys everything around them. The collision of their blows causes a massive explosion, kicking up a thick cloud of dust. In the middle of the smoke, she manages to block one of his attacks but feels the pressure. But he was trapped in a magic circle, and she says the fight just got fun. Kaya taunts him to surpass his limit, and Oscar screams in pain from the effort. With a deafening roar, he unleashes more power, trying to break her magic barrier. Suddenly, Kaya's eyes widen in surprise at what just happened. From the strain, Oscar collapses while still standing, and she comments that he pushed his mana to the limit. She finds this more annoying than she expected, because even if they're estranged, he's still family. Thinking Oscar is finished, she turns and says it's time to face the so-called genius. But looking around, she sees no one and wonders where the boy went. From a distance, she spots Killian inside his own spell and realizes he used the solitary garden. A strange sound rings out, and her expression changes completely as she's caught by surprise. Just then, a dome of light forms around her, trapping the warrior inside. She questions if there's any spell a level 3 mage could use against her. Then she understands. It's a space that blocks both air and mana, making it very dangerous. The beauty of the technique impresses her, and she becomes curious to see what he will become. With a smile, she tells him he can feel it, can't he? That his power isn't enough. She says he can't restrain her perfectly with just his current level of power. After all, even for a genius, the difference in their levels is still too great. She tells him to stop clinging to false hope, because she's going to end this now. Inside the barrier, Kaya is shocked and wonders why her tattoo isn't activating. Killian thinks that a normal level 7 would beat him, but she is a forest warrior. As the former master of the White Tower, he knows all the secrets of their tattoo magic. It is explained that every tower master has access to this secret and ancient information. Their magic works with the mana on their skin, so it can be controlled by removing that mana. He's relieved to have read that, but he knows their true weapon is martial arts. With a wicked smile on her face, Kaya says the situation has gotten a bit complicated. She yells that this is dangerous and lunges at the mage with absurd speed. His goal was to limit her movements, so he prepares his ultimate battle technique. He uses the Oscar style of martial arts and invokes the sound of the waves technique. Kaya is caught off guard by the image of water and wonders if it's an illusion. With her magic disabled, she knows that if she's hit head-on, it's over for her. At the last second, she manages to dodge the attack with a quick, precise movement. But to everyone's surprise, a golden barrier of light appears and blocks the attack. The image fades, and irritated by this, Killian lands a powerful blow on her. He only needed to hold her for a second, or maybe not even half a second to win. But Kaya laughs in his face, telling him he was looking at a fake image. With a victorious smile, she's surprised she managed to escape his blow. She wonders if she was just stalling for fun, or if she truly felt danger there. Intrigued by the fight, she asks who he is, since not even masters entertain her this much. She says that logically she should kill him now, but she wants to wait for his power to blossom. Calling him a toy, the villainess taunts him, but he has no energy to respond. With no mana left, he regrets playing around instead of fighting seriously from the start. But he only needed to buy time, and suddenly a giant black sword falls from the sky. The woman is completely stunned by the arrival of the imposing black sword. Just then, a mysterious man leaps from the sky, his silhouette illuminated by the full moon. He lands hard on the ground, creating a shockwave with his intimidating presence. The man introduces himself as Walker, a superintendent of the Empire's national security. On the ground, Killian finally manages to say her name, Kaya Rockwood, for the reinforcements to hear. With an arrest warrant, he informs her that she's being arrested for murder and arson. Kaya recognizes the man as the Emperor's Black Sword, a title of great respect. Killian is surprised. The Imperial family sent a level 7 knight to help. Seeing all the soldiers, she finds the whole situation incredibly dull and uninteresting. She figures that with the Empire involved, it's no longer worth fighting here, so she raises her hands in surrender, but Walker warns that he won't let her escape. She boasts about being wise for retreating, but realizes he isn't listening at all. With a smile, she warns that she won't forgive this and says goodbye with a lingering threat. Just then, she uses a technique and vanishes in a gust of wind, making a swift escape. A soldier asks if they should pursue her, but Walker says it's no use because she's good. He then turns and orders his men to continue with the ordered siege. Then, he approaches the fallen Killian and asks what he was thinking, attacking like that. But he quickly realizes the mage used up all his energy and passed out right there. With a hand on his shoulder, he says the kid held up well until the end. The scene changes, and Killian suddenly wakes up in what looks like a well-kept garden. He looks at his gem, and with a confused mind, thinks it was all just a dream. A man asks what Radon is staring at, and he replies that it's the family portrait. He proudly shows the photo, but his friend points out that little Kaya was crying in it. The friend asks why he didn't take off his mask, but Radon says he needs to maintain his dignity. The man then jokes that his face is too handsome, and that Radon wanted a more virile one. He then congratulates Radon on his second child, and Radon suggests he join the tower. But Radon says he doesn't care if his children don't become mages, surprising his friend. He explains that a dream is a personal thing, and that his children will know what justice is. With a smile, the man agrees with the wise words of his great friend, Radon. Even so, he asks Radon to send the children to the tower, and Radon says he'll think about it. The scene returns to the present, with Killian opening his eyes and thinking it was all a dream. He sits up in bed, apologizing to Radon, and hears a strange noise in the room. Turning around, He sees Oscar peeling an apple and asks what he's doing there. Oscar is surprised by the question and replies that he was just peeling an apple to eat. Killian asks if he has to do it in front of him, and Oscar says it makes the fruit taste better. Then Killian thanks him for the apple and says it was truly delicious. He then asks how much time has passed, and Oscar replies that it's been 3 long days. He realizes it was the same priestess who healed him, and Oscar assures him he'll be fine. Then, he mentions that Elder Maxim gave them a real chewing out, making Killian relieved he was unconscious for it. Oscar changes the subject and warns him to be careful, as there's a mage hunter in the north. Worried, he asks if anyone from their tower has been caught, since level 5 mages are among the victims. Fortunately, not yet, but his friend warns him not to let his guard down, as other towers have already been attacked. The hunter is in their territory and only attacks mages who are alone, so they'll be safer together. Oscar then confirms he'll return to the White Tower with him, since he found the traitor he was looking for. Killian worries about him, but Oscar assures him that forest warriors recover very quickly. But the concern wasn't just physical, it was about him having fought against his own family. At that moment, Jake opens the bedroom door and calls out the names of the 2 heroes. The boy runs in, incredibly relieved to see Oscar on his feet. Oscar thanks him for calling the priest. Then, Jake hands over a gift he prepared for when Killian finally woke up from the fight. It was the payment for their service. Jake apologizes that it isn't more, but Killian says it's enough. The boy bows in gratitude, and Oscar just reminds them that Mark was supposed to pay. With a smile, Jake says his dream has changed, and he no longer wants to be a politician like his father. Killian beams with pride and says he could be a fantastic mage if he tried. But the boy reveals he's going to join national security to punish evil and save the innocent. After he leaves, Walker comments with a serious look that the incident has been resolved. He explains that all the criminals have been arrested, including the mastermind, Mark Sweet, who is struggling. Walker stares at him coldly and says he is the executive behind the happy ending cartel. Then he orders the guards to take him away, and we see that his daughter has also been caught. Desperate, Mark screams his daughter's name, Ara, as he sees her being led away by the guards. He begs them to release her, swearing up and down that the girl is completely innocent, but Ara is furious and yells at her father for causing this whole mess. Mark is completely shocked and speechless at his own daughter's harsh words. Back in the room, Killian asks if Ara Sweet was also arrested, and Walker confirms it. He explains that she's going to jail because she put a bounty on their heads. Then Walker turns to Oscar and mentions that Jake told him about the crystal ball. Killian confirms it was him, but immediately worries about how he'll explain knowing the code. Walker says his decision was incredible, leaving Killian a bit sweaty and nervous. Then he asks if the master of the magic tower is okay, leaving Killian completely confused. With an awkward laugh, Killian is relieved to see he thought the contact was with her. Then, Walker announces he has to go, looks at his watch, and tells them to take good care of themselves. Killian thanks him and says goodbye, watching the man turn and walk towards the door. But before leaving, he stops for a second, looking like he still has something to say. He turns back and asks if all the mages from the White Tower are like Killian and Oscar. Killian wants to know what he means by that, and Walker just glances back thoughtfully. But he brushes it off and tells the 2 to rest, leaving the room and closing the door. In his thoughts, he reflects that the mages he knows only care about their own profit. However, the 2 he met from the White Tower seem to be very different from all that. He finally understands why the White Tower was so precious to the older generation. Seeing an image from the past, he begins to understand just a little of the reason for such nostalgia.